Hello and welcome back to another MilSurP HQ podcast. I'm Tom, and as always, I'm joined by the man from the Jumbo State, aka the Beef State, aka the Banner State, the Lone Star State. It's of course Kelly. What's up, yo?
Yo, how you doing?
So we had a few technical issues that have precluded us from using live video in this episode, but a lot of the things we're going to discuss today, you definitely won't. You'll definitely wanna and maybe even need to see. So the YouTube version with photos and videos of everything we're discussing today will be up on the channel in a couple of weeks. So you could sub for that if you want, but this is what you get right now.
Tom was just too lazy to edit a video.
Hey, if you join the Patreon or Patreon, whatever the hell you are, you could get it early. Just saying.
And you could come on and join us if you're a Patreon.
Yep. All right, so it's the summer solstice, and we thought that would be a perfect time of the year to talk about some awesome MilSurP. So, Kelly, what's the plan for today?
So today, this is our show and tell episode. So naturally, as MilSurP collectors, collecting over years and years of buying different random things, you end up acquiring a few pieces in your collection that kind of stand out as particularly cool, fun, or interesting. So that's what we're here to discuss today. This is our show and tell episode, just like you would in kindergarten. And to help us do that, we have a few guests as well.
And let me just throw in, by cool and interesting, we just mean literally anything interesting, like a great history, interesting feature, marking, a design story, or if it just simply looks effing cool, that's all. Anything.
Oh, yeah. And this hobby is all about learning as much as you can. So maybe it's tied to a specific unit or just a design, the mechanics of it, or you just like the history of the country. So it can be for any reason, not just a flex.
Yeah.
All right. So joining us today, we have a few guests. Thank y'all for coming on. First up, we have Michael. Thank you for joining us, Michael. I think you've been on before.
No, this is the first time I've been on with you guys. I haven't been able to make the times work the past few times we talked about it. So.
Oh, that's right. You were a proxy for the auction one.
Yeah, I did watch it. I did enjoy that one, and I threw my bids in there.
That's right.
And then we have our friend Frenchie. Thanks for joining us, Frenchie.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
And our buddy from across the pond, Samuel. Thank you for joining us, Samuel.
Thank you for having me.
How's life in Australia? How are the kangaroos?
Well, you might know that I'm living in the future, so it's the 21st of June 2024 already. And let me tell you, it feels exactly like the 20th.
And you didn't warn us about 9/11.
I didn't. I was 6 years old, but I knew what I was doing.
All right. Moving on from that. Perfect transition. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go around the horn and each share. We've picked out 3 of our favorite MilSurPs from our collections for different reasons. So we'll go around and each describe what makes it one of our favorites, why it's interesting, why it's cool, and just throw out a few facts and figures about them as well. And I believe, who's starting us off? Is it you, Tom?
Yeah, so I was privy to some of what these guys are going to discuss, so I'll go first and get us started. So I don't want to follow them. So recently, I went on a huge Springfield trapdoor research kick and was watching and reading everything and dozens of U.S. ordnance reports, and so I found out a lot of interesting information about these. So my first gun is a Springfield Model 1888 trapdoor, and it's chambered in 4570, and when the bayonet's out, it's about 70 inches long, so it's a pretty long one, but it's not that heavy. It's less than $1,000, I'll tell you that. And what's cool is my example is made at Springfield Armory in December of 1892. So well after they accepted the Krag design, but we know they had some issues with getting that started, so they didn't start making Krags for a few years. So they made these, and these were the last trapdoor models to be made ever. They made about 60,000 between 1890 and 1893. So they went deep into 93. And to give you some perspective, they made over 300,000 1873s and just 60,000 of these. So that's already cool. And, this was after the Civil War and before the Spanish-American War. So pretty much all this gun was used for was the Indian wars around the whole country. The most important one was the General Custer's Regiment and the Battle of Little Bighorn. There was a bunch of them. And here's what's interesting about this particular one, the 1888. It has a fairly unique feature, a ramrod bayonet, they call it. And it's like a long steel rod with a Phillips head screwdriver looking tip on the end. So,
No, one of those terrible things.
right. So you've probably seen it before being made fun of in memes and whatnot. But you pulled it out at length to be a bayonet, and it stuck out about 17 inches. Then it was the bayonet, but it could also come out and be a cleaning rod. And that was actually one of the selling points, was its dual purpose.
Oh, I had no idea about the cleaning rod part.
Yeah, so just like the previous bayonet was a trowel and a bayonet, this one was another dual purpose. That and the fact that it was cheaper was what made them say, all right, we'll go with this. But, it's a rod bayonet's kind of odd. But we had them in the 1830s on the Hall rifles and on some of the earlier trapdoor trials rifles. And it must have been good because it went on to the Springfield rifles. So there must have been something to it. I mean, the minute I saw it, I thought it was terrible, but it made it onto hundreds of thousands of rifles.
I mean, it was so good that it eventually made it to the original 1903s as well. So
And Teddy Roosevelt threw a fit.
So 90,000 1903s got it.
which is insane.
But the future died, right? Like you said, with Teddy Roosevelt's quote. I think this was the quote. This bayonet's a flimsy piece of shit. Is that what he said? I think that's what he said.
The worst contraption he'd ever seen, or something like that.
Yeah, more or less.
I have it here. It's even more insulting. The only use for which it is fitted is to stick it in the ground and hold up a tent. I must say that it is as poor an invention as I ever saw. As you observed, it broke off as soon as hit with even moderate violence. It would have no moral effect and mighty little physical effect.
The moral effect's important.
Yeah, you're not confident going with this thing. That was the end of the rod bayonet. So that's why I thought it was cool. Mainly because of that rod bayonet. And also one little thing, my serial is only 10,000 from the last ever serial on record. So not only is it the last model, but it's one of the last ones ever made, which is also the last black powder rifle the U.S. used. So that's the cool part for me. And there's no real great markings on there, but that eagle on the plate is one of my favorite gun markings ever. I need a coaster of that, I think. It screams America. Take a look at that eagle.
Oh, I know a guy.
It is cool, and I know a guy too. But it is cool considering. I mean, I was looking for a trapdoor for a long time, and I always kind of wanted a ramrod just because it was a ramrod bayonet on top of it. But when it came to just feasibility and locality, I was able to grab an 1884 model just with a updated rear sight. But really, the biggest update that you did see in the trapdoors was eventually that ramrod bayonet style. But you can also see why it only lasted for so long.
And I believe the story was the 1884s, they put on a ramrod to try it out, and they complained about the accuracy, and Buffington was in charge, and he said, I have an idea, I'll make a new sight, and that's where that whole Buffington sight came from, which made it again also onto like all the way up to the 1903s.
And I'm sure the Buffington rear sight was smooth sailing with no interruptions whatsoever, and it didn't cause any trouble.
Nope. We totally picked that and stuck with it for decades.
The very simple Buffington sight, they always say. And so the last thing I wanted to say was a quick tip for those interested in getting them. It's not really a great tip, but it takes just 10 minutes, and it'll help you out if you're looking to buy one. Get this book, Trapdoor Springfield by Bud Waite and B.D. Ernst, or Google the photos, but take a look at the photos of all the models together and stare at them for 10 minutes and look at the differences. They're all slightly different from now. Any auction you look at from then on, you'll be able to tell exactly which one it is because they're often mislabeled or just listed as, a Trapdoor Springfield. So you can have a more desirable 1860s trial rifle for the price of like a 1873. The Trapdoor Springfield book is a pretty good one. And he also has in there full production numbers and charts of all the updates, all the U.S. trial information. A lot of info for not such a large book. And that's it for my Trapdoor. We salute you, the last tie to the Civil War and the black powder firearms. Godspeed.
We salute you.
I salute you.
Godspeed.
All right, Sammy.
All right. So the first gun I'm going to introduce to you is my Mauser Vaquero, model of 1904 from Portugal. What's interesting about this one is that it actually escaped the conversion program that started in the 1930s. I think 1939 it was, where most
Wow.
of them were cut down and rechambered to 8mm Mauser. So the famous 8x57mm cartridge. This one remains in its original chambering, which is 6.5 by 58mm, and obviously also stayed longer because everyone needed the long rifles back then. Very special about this one, it has a UDF marking on the butt plate, which signifies it as a rifle bought by South Africa during World War One. So this
Whoa.
was a colonial used rifle and actually or most likely saw combat in World War One, unlike most of the Vaqueros, because the Portuguese were mostly equipped with British equipment in Europe itself. So most of the mainland rifles didn't actually see combat, while the colonial ones did against the Germans in West and East Africa, Mozambique, which is also where it got one of its stock stamps. So it has a marking that signifies that it was based in a Mozambique arsenal, if I recall correctly.
Cool.
I don't speak Portuguese. But yeah, overall, a very lucky find for a very low amount of money, I have to say. And it's very interesting to just hold one of the few that actually managed to survive without being cut down and have evidence of an actual war pedigree on it.
And how many do you think made it to World War One? It can't be that many.
South Africa itself bought 20,000, as I recall. The Germans also captured a bunch. But overall, not that many. The Vaquero itself is also a very interesting rifle in the sense that it is a mix of the Mauser and Mannlicher export actions. So when you look at the bolt, you can tell that it shares features from both lines. That stems from Portugal's history with both using the export rifles from Steyr. So Portugal used the model 1896, which was a modified Gewehr 88 action as a short rifle, mind you. However, they did notice that the Mauser action, mainly the 1893 action, was very popular worldwide, and it obviously had its benefits with a closed-up magazine system. So they did want to get the benefits of the Mauser without losing the smoothness of the Steyr export line of rifles. And initially, they actually did take a look at what the Greeks had, which was the Mannlicher Schönauer model of 1903. Although technically they looked at the 1902, as I recall, and they wanted to have that. However, that was very expensive. It's a very complicated magazine system, which made the rifle expensive, but also a very good rifle. I love it. And so they went ahead and basically created their own actions, incorporating both ideas from Mauser and the Steyr export rifles, creating their own action that encompasses both. So it is an amalgam of what works and what what worked worldwide. Because as you know, many countries in Europe adopted Mausers, equally many countries adopted Mannlicher rifles, and the Portuguese kind of did both, which is why I find the Vaquero 1904 kind of awesome.
Yeah, those things are super cool. And of course, we don't have like any in the United States of the
Right.
non-converted ones.
Now, I have a converted one, and the action is so smooth. It's definitely like the top 3 smoothest of all my actions. So, do you think it's like the best Mauser hybrid.
I mean, how many Mauser hybrids are there? I don't.
Well, you could say the 1903 is a Mauser bit. The
Is it a
Type
hybrid?
99 is a little bit
I mean, they're derivatives, but I wouldn't call
derivatives.
them hybrids. I mean, I think you could say the Type 30 is kind of a hybrid between a Mauser and a Mannlicher Action. But yeah, I think both are pretty smooth. The Vegero is certainly very smooth. I can't argue with that. Although my very last rifle is my number one smoothest rifle I have. But that's
Uh,
full late.
and the Vergero crest, that's how you do a crown. There's a lot of small
Yeah.
crown marks, but they put a giant crown and King Carlos logo, icon or whatever you want to call it, right in the middle. You
Oh
can
yeah,
see,
they wanted to know that Carlos is in charge.
right. You don't have to go. Is that Crown FW? What is that? No, it's a giant Crown CI. All right, Michael, you're up.
All right, so we're gonna take it to your favorite designer, Tom, when it comes to anything Milsurp, with the 1918 Mauser Tankgewehr.
His birthday's
So,
coming up.
so this is one of my favorites and one of my most interesting, just in the sense of how odd and insane it is to have a giant 41-pound, 5'7" monster of a rifle, which is essentially just a oversized Gewehr 98.
Did you say
So,
41 pounds?
Yep, loaded with the bipod, it's about 41 pounds.
I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah, so hauling that up and downstairs to take pictures if I wanted to outside is that's a task in itself. And the bipod, the spades in the bipod, I have to put a piece of wood underneath it so it doesn't dig into the carpet or anything. But yeah, so it's, I mean, just a giant Gewehr 98, very, 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 very similar when it comes to the bolt style and just overall aesthetics of it, with the exception of an added pistol grip and shortened stock, so bearer barrel. But its caliber is a 13.2 millimeter TUF, or Tank und Flieger.
Oof.
So it's about a 52 caliber to equate that, so a little bit bigger than the 50 BMG. And it's actually, what's interesting about this is it's actually the parent to the 50 cal that Browning eventually developed. So he took the 13.2 millimeter and actually developed the 50 cal, the 50 BMG from that. And this round was originally built for the Maxim MG18, which is a full auto anti-tank, anti-material, anti-airplane gun, but that wasn't meant for to be unveiled until 1919, when they were ramping up for what they thought was going to be the spring offensive. So kind of like how the U.S. was doing some stuff for the spring offensive, so were the Germans at the same time. But they needed Tankgewehren out there because the spawn of the tanks on the battlefield kind of pushed that forward. So yeah, about 17,000 were made, starting in, I think, very early, I think January 1918, all the way through April, I believe, is when they finished. Goes out to about 500 meters max effective range.
Did they have many things that could get through the tank armor before this?
They tried with standard 8mm AP rounds, but they are seeing that it was just either deflecting or denting the metal. So nothing really up until that point, other than actual field guns, artillery, stuff like that. But nothing pointed that they can get within close range as tanks were approaching the trenches. Because the max range of the Tankgewehr is only 500 meters. After 100 or 200 meters, the penetration drops off pretty significantly. When it goes from, I think, 100 meters, you could think about 26 millimeters of penetration on steel. And out to 500 meters, I think it got down to 18 millimeters of penetration. So, and you still had to hit it at the right spot too. So it wasn't like anywhere you hit it on the tank.
Right.
But the whole reason behind this was essentially just to push hot molten steel through a metal plate an armored plane on a tank and not necessarily blow anything up. We're not talking like Tom Hanks with a 1911 and Saving Private Ryan.
Two World Wars.
But it was really just to create Spalding inside that tank and to kind of destroy anything inside the tank, whether it be human, whether it be engine related, pipes, ammo, things that were inside the tank to kind of stop it in its tracks, for lack of better terms. That was really the goal of the Tankgewehr. So when it came down to it, it was a two-man team that fielded it. You usually had to fire from the standing position or kneeling position, because firing it from the prone, you were probably not in a good spot to do that with your shoulder.
I bet.
Yeah, because you were firing the weight of the bullet, you were looking at an 808 grain bullet traveling at 2,500 feet per second. So out of a 3-foot barrel.
So you said you have to stand and shoot it?
Yeah, pretty much. So either standing or in a quasi kneeling position, because so you just stood in the trench on the parapet on the outside, kind of camouflage, covered out, and you and your 2-man team just waiting and then shooting and get off as many rounds as you can, and then disperse and try and get out of there or fall back to the next trench, so on and so forth. So that was really the best way to use the Tankgewehr, try and hit these tanks, a couple shots, and then get out of there, and then keep on peltering it until it could eventually slow itself down or hurt itself and stop it itself.
Shit.
Yeah, I love how ridiculous those things are.
Yeah, and I'll send you a picture so you can put it up there for like the round that I have, the one original round that I do own, compared to like an 8mm. So you can just see the size difference, and I'll see if I can get some photos of it up next to a Gewehr 98. You can see the size difference in the receiver and everything, because like the bolt is like the size of about your forearm. The bolt's about 4 to 5 pounds, probably a little bit more actually, and you can use that as a trench club too.
And do we know if they were effective enough that the British were talking about it?
Oh yeah, they were definitely talking about it, and they were effective enough to create the line of anti-tank rifles all the way up through World War II. I mean, you had the Panzerbusch 39, I believe, eventually from the Germans. You had the PTRD and the PTRS from the Russians.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch from other countries too. That like the Tankgewehr is what started that line essentially, and they saw it enough to where it had enough penetrating power, enough shock factor on the battlefield that they wanted to keep on doing it. Granted, by World War II standards, you're looking at a lot better armor, a lot faster tanks. So it got outdated real quick, these anti-tank rifles. So that was what became more anti-material rounds versus anti-tank. So now we're looking at trying to break up barriers, trying to break up concrete, bunkers, stuff like that, versus actual moving hardened steel tanks. So, and what's another cool thing about mine is it's actually, of the 17,000 or so that were made, mine's actually serial 215, so 215. So it's actually very, very early, and it's 100% matching. So it made it through all the way. It may have seen some post-war use in other countries, but it made it all the way through matching, but a very, very low serial number. They did have some KERS models, is what they called it, so short models where they were just shortened down a few inches in their production line. But those are random throughout the production. They weren't really set to a serial standard.
It's almost like a novelty gun, and I'm surprised
it is.
it made it down to you. Like, people didn't just keep it in their collections for years because it's, like a big joke, oversized chair kind of thing.
Yeah, I have the paperwork with it when it got deregistered off from the amnesty in 1968, I believe. I got the paperwork for that because, contrary to popular belief, you can own a Tankgewehr and its original caliber without doing paperwork, like NFA paperwork or anything. It's completely legal based off a Curio and Relic exemption. However, if you live in a state that you can't have anything more than 50 cal, or a place around the country you can't have that, then obviously you can't have it. But other than that, it's completely legal to own. You just got to find one.
But there's a 75% divorce rate for people who buy one. Just letting you know.
And good luck
Oh.
finding ammo.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my biggest thing is trying to find the ammo right now because you could probably think about one round is about $300 or $400 if you can find it. And the only round, luckily mine came with one, but the only rounds that I can really find are coupled up with another Tankgewehr, and I don't want to buy a whole new Tankgewehr just to get a few rounds. But I could, but I can't afford that a second one.
Explain that to the wife of why you had to get a second one.
Yeah.
I swear.
I needed
I'd
the
be-
ammo.
I just
I'd be-
wanted to
I'd-
shoot it.
I'd be losing money if I didn't buy this.
Right.
So that I'm always on the hunt for some original rounds, but I've never seen loose original rounds by themselves for sale. The only ones I've ever seen were already sold, so I was never able to actively see one for sale. Versus some at auction that came with the rifle. So
And it is like a weird one because you would expect people to reload it by now, but it's like super weird to manufacture or something like that.
yeah, the casing for it, so the case head is semi-rimmed. So people always say, "Oh, you can just take 50 cal and kind of adjust it, neck it down, whatever it is you want to do with a 50 cal brass," but you can't really do that because it won't be as stable. That's another big reason why a lot of people rebarrel their Tankgewehr to 50 cal, kind of like a boy's anti-tank rifle. So a lot of people rebarrel them, so you'll see them out there as 50 cal barrels, but it's really, really, really difficult without getting super expensive to reload for these because the brass is just non-existent, and you kind of have to manipulate some stuff, some metallurgy. So then it becomes a safety issue as well.
And did you say how many about were made?
About 17,000. I think it was a
Oh,
little bit under than that
shit.
number. So yeah, there's a lot that there's probably I think 20 or 30 in the country right now that are just in museums too. So like they're out there. They're in museums behind glass. I think I've seen 2 or 3 behind glass at museums before. But yeah, there's a lot out there. It's just people are holding on to them for a long time and not really putting them on the market until they need the money for it. So I was lucky enough to get mine for a very, very good deal on Arms List of all places. So I definitely had to dot my I's and cross my T's to make sure I wasn't getting scammed on that one.
Yeah, that seems a little sketchy. I'd be like, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, I met some good people along the way from buying it for the people that sent it to me, transferred it to me, and everything. So, met some good people along the way, and luckily it all worked out because I was happy once it got delivered by the UPS driver carrying a 41-pound 6-foot box.
That poor man.
Yeah, I actually went out and helped him pull it out of the truck. I felt so bad.
What the hell is this thing?
Golf
and
clubs.
Furniture.
And it took me about 30 to 45 minutes to unwrap it fully. Yeah.
I would
That's
hope they would wrap that well.
Right. Better than the barrel poking through.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that's one of my favorite pieces because it's definitely like a showcase piece in the center of the gun room. But it's also just very cool because it's a low serial number one.
Yeah.
And you can own it. It's just you just got to find one and be willing to pay for it.
Yep.
All right. So, Frenchie, the rule is your gun has to be more powerful than the previous gun.
I wouldn't say it's more powerful. It's up there in size though, and caliber wise.
Oh, it's a bigger caliber.
So
shit.
yeah, the first one
All right, what do you
I'm
got?
showing off is my model of 1777 corrected year 9 French land pattern musket.
Whoa.
Often you'll hear these usually called Charlevilles, especially in the U.S. That's more of a collector's term for them. That's not an official designation of any kind. There are designated Charleville muskets, but those are U.S. made ones from the 1820s, 1815 or so. But mine actually is in fact a Charleville, so I can kind of get away with calling it a Charleville. There's 11 or so different manufacturers of them. Mine just happens to be an actual Charleville, which I think is kind of cool. So yeah, this is kind of, I would say, the most famous French musket of the period. Often, a lot of times, the model 1777s are usually, people say they're using the Revolution. They were using the Revolution by French troops that assisted us. No U.S. like militiamen or regular forces actually ever got this. They got older Charleville models of 1763.
Well, it sounds like if you're gonna have one from the 1700s. The 1776 is a sick year to have.
Yeah. It kind of depends because I'll bring it up a little bit later about collecting these. Because it's kind of a mystique around collecting muskets. Because obviously most people kind of stick to that centerfire firearms realm. For me, my first love of firearms was always muskets. That was as a kid, I always wanted to own a musket. In which my first ever firearm was a musket. Not this one. A brown bess actually. But so for me, muskets were always like the coolest thing. I don't know why. But so my specific model, it has markings all over. Half of them I don't really know what they mean because the research on these is kind of spotty. Not a ton of people have interested in them, so there's still definitely a lot of area to do research in them. Mine though is dated 1807, which this is my oldest firearm I have a date for. Um, I have one that's potentially older. The Brown Bess might be older. I doubt it, but this one at least has a concrete date on it. And this is also one of my few firearms that has a regiment marking on it. This one is marked 39th Infantry Regiment, which actually 1807 is pretty late into the French Empire, the first French Empire's reign, but that regiment itself still took place in many of like the major battles that happened in that period, such as Eylau, Friedland, Wagram, Leipzig, and then also they were at the Battle of La Cefale, which is the last French pitched victory of the period, which I think is cool. Obviously, I can't say it was at any of those battles because it's almost impossible to know. These aren't. There is a number that potentially is a serial number. It's 38, I believe, but I don't really know if it's actually meant to be a serial number. Don't know who it actually was issued to, so there's no way to really tell where, like what battles this
Yeah,
potentially could have been at.
I'm not shocked that there's not such great paperwork from the 1700s.
Yeah. Like France in general was never amazing at paperwork up until like World War II even. So to suspect that during the French Empire they would be able to keep track of who owned this pretty pretty unlikely. But yeah, so as I mentioned, fire is a pretty hefty caliber as most muskets do at the period. French muskets generally were caliber 69 caliber,
Oof.
17.5 millimeter ball. So solid lead, about 417 grains approximately, with another 188 grains of powder behind it. Which obviously it's black powder, so not as powerful as something like a Tankgewehr, but definitely not something you want to be hit with.
Well, that's pretty spicy, yeah.
Yeah, definitely
And it's
very
coming.
spicy.
It's coming out of a 60-inch barrel. So, which you would think with something that long, it would actually be substantially heavier. It's only about 10 pounds, and it's actually really balanced quite well. Even for like its size and other muskets that I've held, I have more modern firearms that I would hate to carry around more than this. I mentioned earlier that it's called a corrected year 9. So that's referring to year 9 of the French Revolutionary calendar, which is 1800. The French Revolutionary calendar starts in
Whoa.
September. It follows the harvest season basically, and which is also 14 months instead of 12. They're all renamed and everything. It's kind of confusing when you trying to go by the date, but if you work out the math, it's 1800 should be the year for it. But it's some slight improvements to the frizzen of it. I think there's a spring for the cleaning rod now. There's some changes to the springs of the barrel bands. Because what makes a Charleville kind of different from a lot of muskets of the period is that the barrel isn't pinned in place. Instead, it uses spring barrel bands that become commonplace in most firearms at the time, which makes it easy. Obviously, if there's ever any cleaning or repair that needs to be done to it, you can just pop the springs off, and the barrel comes out of the stock.
Oh, cool.
And then, kind of an interesting fact about these that a lot of people don't know is that up until World War One, these were the most mass-produced firearms in history, which always seems to surprise people when you think of what's the most mass-produced. People think of obviously Mausers, Gewehr 98s, that sort of thing. Which obviously those are mass-produced in the millions beyond what this eventually those surpassed this. But at the time, before World War One, 7 million of these were made total. 5 million of the original model, and then another 2 million of the year 9 models. So together they make up 7 million, in which they actually saw quite a bit of use all throughout Europe. A lot of them, as France retreated, France retreating joke. Um, as France retreated out of Germany, they left about 750,000 of
I
them.
believe it.
Which time was this?
Yeah.
Which retreat was this?
This will be the 1813 one. So,
It's dropped everything and ran that one.
but yeah, so Germany actually, a lot of the German states actually used French muskets up until they started getting Dresden needle guns later on. So you see these kind of pop up in there, Italy as well. They kind of leave their mark on the continent for quite a bit and influence a lot of other musket designs later on as well.
And did these eventually become candidates for becoming breech loaders with some sort of system?
Yeah. So this model not typically. A lot of these were just like sent to other places. A lot of them probably got destroyed. You do see some show up as conversions. Most of the ones you see converted are usually models from the 1820s. There's an 1822 model, but there's also like the 1850 models that were then converted into the tabatières that you'll hear about. Online, you'll hear them called Zulu shotguns, which is just a
Right.
marketing term for shotgun conversions on the U.S. market. You also hear like Champion and Hunter was good other names for them. But yeah, some of these were converted into tabatières as kind of a way to kind of just modernize them, as they weren't meant for really frontline use. They were just a way to what's somewhat modernize these muskets into breech loading guns to then give to second line troops. So we don't have to, our more modern, expensive guns can go to more frontline troops instead.
So yeah, that's even more amazing than one made it down to today. Like if they were converting some and some were getting tossed and lost, and it
Yeah, obviously
amazes me how long.
this thing being over 200 years old at this point, and there's not a ton of them
Crazy.
left. There's probably plenty in Europe somewhere hidden in someone's barn or someone's attic, all rusted out and moldy. But at least in the U.S., there's not a ton of them. That kind of brings me to my tip about collecting these is I think muskets are a really like underappreciated area. Again, I have kind of an affinity for them, so that's just bias on my part. But people always kind of surprised about the prices of them. If you look up, you search up muskets for sale, a lot of times you're going to get really high end ones. Usually these are any that are associated in any sort of way, potential any sort of way with the American Revolution. That's usually going to be the driving point. That's where you're going to see ones to like 6 to 10 grand for one. But honestly,
Wow.
you can get a good original musket for 1 to 2 grand. Which I mean, if you think about how old this thing is, that's not terrible. The model that I currently have, I got for $1,000 even, and it's an imperial one from the first French Empire, unit marked.
I
Yeah,
always get scared when I look. I'm overwhelmed. There seems to be so many different little variations, and
yeah,
I panic and I go, I can't. I'm not gonna get it.
yeah, and like I said, there's not a ton of great resources for it, so it's kind of scouting forums. There's a couple books around. They're sometimes usually mentioned in like big overview books. There might be some info in there. Um, yeah, it's just like doing a decent amount of research to know what you're looking for. The good thing is of them is that they aren't really faked. A lot of times, there's obviously reproductions, but those usually aren't people trying to pull a fast one. That's more of, hey, people want an 1863 Springfield, so let's make a couple of those. But like something like a Charleville like this, someone isn't like de or like isn't making look older than it is. Usually, a lot of times those also have pretty obvious new manufacturer marks, and they'll put like
Right.
company names and stuff like that. So as long as it's typical of what you just look for in looking at a normal firearm. Does it look age appropriate? Does it look like anything was done to it? Knowing the differences between variants. When you get to like muskets, a lot of times it's just like, oh, this spring was slightly moved this way. The frizzen was slightly angled more. So there's not a huge difference
A
in
lot.
it. Obviously, if you want to get real niche with it, you can. But there's also, you can with something like a 1777. It's just like, oh, that's a musket, and it fits my collection.
Right. Shit.
Yeah, it's definitely an area I don't have a lot of experience with, so it's cool to hear about.
Yeah, I agree. That's something I want to get into, but it's just that black powder rabbit hole that I don't have too much experience with it that I want to, but it's just kind of makes me
Yeah.
nervous.
It's
Yeah,
intimidating.
Yeah.
yeah. It's because obviously, I mean, A lot of people also don't have places they could shoot it because an indoor range isn't going to let you fire off a musket, unfortunately.
Right.
Lame.
Right. That's a big problem. I'm surprised all of our picks are 1918 and prior. There's nothing so far from the World War II.
I'm going to keep disappointing you in that aspect then.
Sorry. By the way, Frenchie, since you mentioned the Battle of Wagram, I actually grew up like 2 kilometers away from a French soldier's graveyard from that
That's-
battle. So maybe, perhaps, one of those carried your musket.
That would be cool.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, it's always wild to think about stuff like that. Or like if you're watching a World War One or World War Two like documentary and you see guys marching with the rifles, like, well, that could be one of mine.
Right. I tell my family that is mine. That is the guy who's carrying my. The kids don't know, and you know what? The wife doesn't even care enough.
And of course, if you ever have to sell it, of course it's obviously that one.
Yep. There it is. There it is. Can you believe that's here right now? All right, Kelly, do you have something beyond 1918, or are you going to keep it going?
I do not actually.
Oh shit!
I'll follow up the rear. My first one is probably one of my favorites in my collection, if not my favorite, simply because of a marking that it has. So it's not particularly rare in and of itself. It is a British Webley Mark VI, made in 1915. It made like, what is it, like 300,000 of these or so. So it's like the main British revolver of World War One and for a period after. Originally chambered in .455 Webley or 455 Zulu stopper. It is the later one. It has the 6-inch barrel, the big ol' heckin' chonker one. That's like a, what is it, 2.5 pounds or something like that. Unfortunately, it's been converted to 45 ACP, but that's not a big deal.
God's caliber.
The damn right. The reason I chose it is because of a very specific marking on it that is not by the military, but on the back of the strap, like where you're, what is it? Oh, I forgot the revolver term. The rear of the pistol grip, basically. There is the name and
The
unit.
thingy. It's called the thingy.
Yeah. There's the name and, yeah, backstrap. There you go.
You said the strap on the back.
The strap on the back. What could that be called? I have no idea. But on there is stamped the name and the unit of the officer that bought it, that went into combat in World War One. And it is stamped LT.H.J. Foote, 4 WEL, so it's Lieutenant H.J. Foote of the 4th Welsh Division. And I was able to find a lot of the British military records are actually uploaded online. And I didn't find our Lieutenant Foote. I did find, I think, his brother, though, who was, I think, like a private or something like that. But the 4th Welsh Division was deployed to Gallipoli in 1915. So things probably didn't go well for Lieutenant Foote because the British kind of got their shit pushed in at Gallipoli.
Yep.
And the reason his name is on it is because officers at that point had to buy their own pistols. They had to like provide their own, and there's like a list of approved ones that the British military allowed and would like provide ammunition for. Obviously, the Webley was one of those. Later, they provided them like to the officers without them having to pay for them. So, but this guy being deployed in 1915 had to buy his own shit and provide his own revolver. So he bought one of these, and this one's dated 1915, so that lines up. But now it also has the British military proof marks, which it wouldn't, I don't think it would have had going in initially. So it was scooped up at some point by the British military after it probably left services of Lieutenant Foote. So I just think it's really cool that it has like the name of the guy that carried it and the unit in World War One, and they were in like a big notable battle that everyone who's into World War One history has heard of.
Yeah, that's real cool. And wow, I do love when you could trace not only the unit but when you do go look it up, when it's not just they were a reserve unit and they waited and nothing happened, like on a lot of my old ones. It's fun when there was actually some action.
Nope. Yeah, like I think the 4th Welsh They shipped off in like July of 1915, and like the serial of this revolver dates to roughly like May of 1915. So that also lines up. So he had a brand spanking new revolver for that battle.
That's awesome. Now, should you go find the family, the Foot family heirs, and give them the gun?
I mean, they're probably in England, so can't have it. So screw it.
I think
Shit.
you actually can. It's an obsolete caliber gun. You might be able to.
But now it's in 45 ACP, which is the best caliber ever. Modern.
And how much
No.
value-wise is the difference between an original and a 45 ACP one?
Pretty significant. So like a 45
Shit.
ACP one, they're like 600-700 or so these days, maybe a little bit more. Original 455s are they're reaching up to like 1200 almost.
So it's almost like the Vagueros, the original, like what Sam had there, are so much more
Yep. Oh, and that'll be
than the
my
converted ones.
little tip if you want one of these. There's a couple ways to tell if they've been converted or not, and it's all about the cylinder. So a few things you can look at will be the serial number on the side of the cylinder. Usually that got shaved during the conversion process, but not 100% of the time. You can also just look at some pictures of an original 455 and one that's been converted to 45 ACP, and just get a feel for the gap between like the back of the cylinder and the receiver face. And then also, if they have a picture of the back of the cylinder, ones that have been converted to 45 ACP, there won't be any markings. It'll just be machine marks. Original 455 Webleys will have a bunch of like acceptance stamps, like the British like to put on every single thing.
That's cool. Some people might want a 45 ACP because of it's right because it's readily available.
Yeah, I mean, if you do have a 45 ACP, you still have to reload for it because the standard 45 ACP pressure is like the proof load for 455. So,
I was about to say, how does it affect the shooting of it?
so
Nope.
it's definitely a reloaders only kind of gun. So I reload light 45 ACP for it and use like the half moon clips. I did get some 45 auto rim, which is what it was originally kind of cut for. It's just like the rimmed 45 ACP. So I'm going to be using that to reload. That way I can definitely keep them separate. And then
Yeah.
I can crack it open and fling brass everywhere at the range.
I know Steinel, I think, just came out with their own Webley 45 ACP downloaded to
Nice.
455. So that's available as well for non-reloaders out there, and they do want to get a 45 ACP Webley. They have
Okay,
that available.
That's a good
I
resource.
think it just came
Yeah.
out not too long ago. So,
I like that.
but you still have to use moon clips and everything for it because it's still just 45 ACP, just downloaded down to 455 Webley.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, 45 auto rim brass is the way to go just because it looks cooler.
And using moon clips is part of the fun.
Yep, not wrong.
All right. So it's back to me here. I'm going to come in now with a Mauser. Surprise.
Oh boy.
But it's a Yugoslavian Model 24. And it's a 98 Mauser derived bolt action rifle chambered in 8mm Mauser and a standard 5-round staggered magazine. It's just about the size of a K98, but most closely like an FN-24 at the time because FN had a big hand in the design. My example was made in 1936 in Yugoslavia at the Military Technical Institute. I won't even try to pronounce it, but it was under King Peter II's rule. And this was the primary rifle for the newly formed Yugoslavian army, which they just came out of. This might be tough for Sammy here, but they came out after World War One. What was it? Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo all left the Austro-Hungarian Empire and formed their own kingdom. I don't know if you guys are angry at them.
Too soon, but you mentioned a few nations that were never part of the empire.
Oh, who?
Oh, also the arsenal is Kragujevac, if I
Yeah.
recall correctly. Just for those interested.
So yeah, that was first they were the state of the Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. Then they were the kingdom. But by the time my rifle was made in 36, they were already the kingdom of Yugoslavia in 29. And the thing I find interesting about it is that they asked FN to make them their rifle, and FN said, you like you need a shitload of rifles. What we'll do is we'll sell you the machine. We'll make you some, but then we'll sell you the machinery so you could do it on your own. And so in 1926, they started making 100,000 rifles, but FN sent people over and workers and helped Yugoslavia just build an entire factory that was on par with FN in just a couple of years. And they made almost 1 million of them, of the Model 24s, and then went on to do all that 47, 48 work post-war. And so they didn't exist in 1918, and then just like 10 years later, they're making some of the best Mausers out there. I thought that was awesome. And the fact that FN helped as much was interesting. And this gun, though, has one other interesting feature, and that's it has the enclosed bolt head feature that only a few Mausers have. And it's kind of an unnecessary feature, but the Costa Rican 1910 had it, and a bunch of Serbian Mausers have it. And it's just this bolt head modification that allows the rim of the cartridge to be the only thing that protrudes outside the barrel. So they literally had to cut a recess in the chamber so that the extractor could fit and you can get flush with the barrel. So if you ever had to rebarrel these, it was such an annoying thing. And it offered not much. So it was an option on a lot of the Mausers, and everyone said, no, we don't need that. So it kind of died. It was kind of a shitty idea, but makes it rare, And the only other cool thing about this is the crown of Peter II is on the stock. And I don't know if you guys seen the famous video of King Alexander of Yugoslavia getting shot in 1934. Peter took over for his father, and he was only 11 years old. So the cartouche on my 1936 rifle is from a 13-year-old kid. So I thought that was cool. And if you haven't seen the video, you should go check it out. Look up King Alexander, because he gets assassinated, and the guy who did it gets struck down by a cavalry guy on a horse with a sword. It's pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I've seen that video. It's
Dang.
wild.
Yeah, you never get to see the guy with the sword do any action, but he did it. And he's whacking him. So poor King Alexander, but 11-year-old Peter came over, and his cartouche is on my rifle.
So it was a cartouche like the Superman S that everyone drew in middle school.
No, it's just Roman numeral 2. And one tip, though, is if you want to know a lot about these Mausers and how to date them, there's some resources and great books out there, like the Serbian and Yugoslav Mauser book, Bogdanovich. But Large Poops on Reddit, I have his post bookmarked. 8 years ago on guns, he posted a beautiful guide to the Yugoslavian Mauser. Large Poops.
Shout out to Large Poops.
Shout out to Large Poops. So go check it out on Reddit. He sums up all the models, all the years, how many are made. I'm not going to tell you. Go there. Large Poops. Thank you. And 8 years ago, I hope he's alive. You never know. COVID might have got him. Large Poops,
I was
reach
gonna
out if
say,
you're alive.
maybe a large
might have
poop got him. Brain cell.
You never know.
The one poop that was too large.
So that's it for my a lot of people call it the Serbian 24, but it really is a Yugo 24. I guess Yugos have a bad reputation, but not because of this one. All right, Sammy, what you
All right,
got?
so your pick actually made me change mine, so I had two alternatives.
What?
Oh shit!
So yeah, my second rifle is just going to absolutely dunk on yours. My second rifle is a Serbian model of 1899.
Ooh,
As many of you know, by virtue of never seeing them, Serbian rifles from the World War I era are very, very rare, which might have something to do with a full occupation for 3 years and 25% of the population dying and a lot of attrition. And additionally, most that actually did survive the conflict were then converted to a short rifle pattern and rechambered to, again, 8x57mm Mauser. However, this one actually survived all of this. It's not in the best shape. The barrel kind of looks like Medford rifling. However, it is still in its
cool.
long configuration, still got its original stock, original bolt, and it's still chambered in 7x57mm. So
Wow.
the Serbians adopted the same cartridge as the Spanish, for example. And
I'm
what's
I'm
cool
not
about
sure I've ever seen one for sale, to be honest.
Yeah, we're not
I've
here
only
to.
ever seen the one that I have, and I got it immediately, or rather, I bid on it immediately, won it for what's essentially a steal, but many people were deterred by a stock crack, a pretty gnarly one. but yeah, it's a very well used rifle. Unfortunately, the crest, so it used to bear the Royal Serbian crest on top of the receiver. It's almost faded away. However, on the left-hand side of the receiver, you still have the inscription that was made in Berlin. So it was a contract rifle. Obviously, those were not produced by Serbia itself. They didn't have the capabilities of creating or producing those rifles. However, they did later convert them on their own. This example especially is a good tale on what these went through. So this rifle went through the First Balkan War, the Second Balkan War, World War One, every conflict, every little skirmish that happened after, and World War Two, and somehow went through all of that without being destroyed entirely. And what's super cool is that not just the barrel was worn when I got it, but the chamber was actually, and the receiver as well, was slightly warped. So I got that
Oh.
fixed for a good chunk of money because it was used so hard. So there was actual warping in the metal because it was so shot out.
Wow. Yeah, that
Yeah.
really saw some use.
Oh yeah. I love my Balkan Wars rifles. I have a few, but this one is, I think, easily the rarest I have, simply by virtue of them seeing such high attrition rates.
How many
And they
would
were
you
also used.
say?
Pardon?
Would, how many would you say you've seen or are known to exist nowadays?
I know of one other. That's it.
Damn.
No, wait. I know of two other. One is in a museum, and that's it.
Yeah, I think I've seen like one or two converted ones, like the 1899 Cs for sale ever.
Yeah, those pop up somewhat regularly, but nowhere near the rarity of an unconverted 1899.
So that's got to be your rarest rifle, then, no? I mean,
I would
there's like
almost
two.
think so. It's hard to gauge because I think the original contract was for some 110,000 rifles. However, as I said, most just got absolutely destroyed or converted later.
Right, and we know that Yugoslavia, once they had that giant FN built factory, they were redoing everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So the
So
ones they got their
I
hands on, they
presume,
probably mess with.
yeah, and I presume that this one, since as was initially mentioned, I am in Austria, I assume this one was captured and thus managed to escape all these conversion programs.
Wow, cool. And all the writing on it is in the Cyrillic language,
Yeah,
even the German factory or whatever.
yeah.
All right, cool.
That's cool.
Wow, that's a nice rare
Damn.
one.
Tough one to follow.
Michael, you're up.
All right, so we can jump a few decades into the future with this one, specifically 1941. So the Johnson rifle of 1941 is also one of my favorites and one of the quirkiest ones because it's not really a design that was done before, done after, or usually held on for a long time. So the Johnson rifle, it was designed by Melvin Johnson, who was a lawyer, also a Marine Reserve officer. So he kind of wanted to get his skin in the game he was a long-time shooter, wanted to get in the game of designing weapons. And he came out with a Johnson rifle, a bit too late in the sense of the M1 Garand was already being kind of mass produced at that point. And however, the U.S. government did say, let's trial this. Let's see how it goes. They trialed it against the Garand. It still lost out on the Garand. However, it did perform very, very well. And I think really the biggest reason why it probably lost out was because the Garand was already being mass produced. So they didn't want to stop tooling and then switch things up for the Johnson rifle.
Do you think it's better?
Me personally, yes, I do.
Oh,
In the sense of I feel like it's more balanced than a M1 Garand because the Garand obviously the Johnson rifle is just a bare barrel all the way through because it's a short recoil system with the barrel moving. Where the Grand, obviously, you have the wood stock all the way to the front with the gassing and everything. So I think it's a little bit more balanced. I like it better, and I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than the Grand, but I would say me personally, I prefer it over the Grand just to shoot and like the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, but not good
But
enough to stop production and change the
yeah,
machinery over it.
I think that was the big reason. Like it performed well, and when it came to accuracy, I mean, it was a 10-round rotary magazine fed from the side from 2 5-round stripper clips, so you didn't have an 8-round in-block clip. You had the 10 rounds. You can top off the magazine when you wanted to. You didn't have to use a full round 8-round in block, or you had to manipulate it in such a way to try and reload it. So it has some pros over the Grand, but also has some cons when it comes to just that use, that reliability, because it wasn't really truly tested like the Grand was already. But it was really meant to be taken apart. Melvin Johnson had the idea of having the barrel taken apart so you can pack it in a pack and potentially jump out of a plane with it for the Paramarines that were in during that time frame before it really kicked off in the Pacific. So Johnson really tried to get these contracts done with the military. However, the U.S. government wasn't really having any of it. However, other countries like the Netherlands, they wanted to purchase a lot of them. So the bulk of the contract, about 20,000 rifles total, I think, were on order for the Netherlands Purchasing Committee. So the Dutch East Indies, for the nil Dutch East Indies troops down there. That's really where they wanted to go with it. So they tried to do that, and then by the time that contract got ready to go, Japan invaded the Dutch East Indies, so it kind of put that contract on a stop. Johnson did produce like the Johnson light machine gun, which is also well liked by the Marines, and that one was actually adopted in small numbers by the U.S. government for the Marine Corps and other countries too. But Johnson, he still wanted to get these guns out to the Marines. He actually donated 23 guns to the Marine Corps. Just he wanted to give them to him. He put them out there, and so those 23
He's a
guns
good
went.
salesman.
Yeah, so those 23 guns actually went out to the 1st Paramarine Battalion, and they saw action on the Solomon Islands very early on at Guadalcanal, stuff like that. And I mean, there's 2 significant people who used the Johnson to earn. One earned a Silver Star, Sergeant Harry Tully. He earned it on Gavutu, which is during Guadalcanal. He got the Silver Star for reportedly killing 42 Japanese soldiers with his Johnson rifle.
Whoa, that's a good
and
day.
then later on, there was a Captain Dunlap who used it on Iwo Jima, and he earned the Medal of Honor with the Johnson rifle. So just some 2 notable actions with it, and ultimately the other Paramarine battalions, they wanted these rifles. So about 773 total Johnson rifles were procured by the Marine Corps out of the 20 or so thousand that were made overall. So it's very, very, very unlikely to ever get a Marine Corps Johnson rifle. It's one of the sought after things to get for those people who collect that stuff. But again, there's no definitive way to know that you have a Marine Corps one either, because there was no serialization chart or anything. So it really just comes down to provenance if you can get one.
I was going to ask if there was some marking that can tell you, but that sucks.
There's some signs you can see, like at one point the Marines modified it a little bit. This is all suspect and everything. This is all hearsay. But they cut out the peep sight on the Johnson rifle to make it more of a V notch. So that was a modification that was made. There's no proof saying that's Marines. However, a lot of things are pointing towards that direction. So there are some things, but then the only other way you can tell is if an actual serial number for a Johnson rifle was documented and used. That's really the only way you can get the provenance for it. But they had a short life after the Battle of Bougainville campaign. They were actually told to bury and destroy all of their Johnson rifles. So literally take apart the barrel and just bury the barrel into the ground. So if you go relic hunting, you can probably find some Johnson barrels out in the sand out there. But there were some reports of people taking them apart, stuffing them in their bags, and making it home with them, or shipping it back home some way or another.
Man,
So some cool.
poor Melvin Johnson. He had a great idea, and he's shopping it to whoever. And he's
if he was maybe
nil.
3 or 4 years earlier on the design,
Right.
I feel like it would have been the grand trials would have gone a little bit longer, probably. So yeah, it was just 3 or 4 years, a little too late for that rifle. But he did have success with his LMGs, his light machine gun. That was very well liked by the Marines, and that actually saw service. But some other countries, other than the Netherlands, they liked the rifle as well. So they were sent over to China during the Chinese Civil War. Some got captured by the PLA. Another cool thing is these were actually used for training and saw use during the Bay of Pigs invasion down in Cuba. So
that's cool.
it got a little bit, got all the way that far into
20 years later.
Yeah, they just used whatever they could to give those guys something to storm the beaches with once again.
And again, there's so few made. It's still these. This is another one. I'm amazed that it got to one of you guys.
Yeah,
it's only 20,000 right? Isn't it like 20-something thousand total?
Yeah, I think 23,000. They had A, B, and the no prefix block, A block, and B block, and I don't think the B block got finished out. So about 22,
people burying them. Yeah.
Yeah, and of that, only 773 went to the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And then they did have 1,000 that did go over to Chile that were chambered in 7mm. So there are some people out there who have a 7mm Mauser barrel for that. So some say it's the better Mauser caliber.
I do like how you can just swap the barrel and that's it.
Yeah, it's very cool. You can just pop the barrel off. So just one of those cool design features where you just use the tip of a bullet, you pop a latch, and the barrel comes right off. And then just put it in reverse, and you can throw it back together real quickly. And once you do that, once you take the barrel off, that's considered field stripped. So from there, you just clean it like you would normally from there. And another cool thing, go ahead, Tom.
Oh no, I was gonna say it's almost New York compliant, but there's a bayonet lug, so never mind.
What about the barrel shroud? Is that a thing?
Oh, yeah, never mind.
It's got a heat shield.
Nice try, Tom. Nice try.
And that semi-pistol grip stock, they might say, is a pistol grip, so never mind.
Yeah. Granted, the commercial barrels you can get, they don't have a bayonet lug, so you can always just pop a commercial barrel on there.
All right, so now it's back on the list.
Yeah, so they did have a lot of. It was a big candidate for sporterization after the war because they got sold off to surplus.
Well, honestly, my biggest problem with it was when I first saw them, I thought they were already sporterized or cut down, till you know the story and all about it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a lot of barrels sticking out.
And another cool thing about them is that a lot of people don't realize, because it's kind of internal to the gun, is a lot of modern designs can be traced back to the Johnson rifle. The most notable is the bolt and the locking lugs. If you take a look at the locking lugs, they very, very closely resemble an AR-15 bolt. So Eugene Stoner took tips from Melvin Johnson when he developed the AR line of rifles, and the bolt, the locking lugs on an AR-15 are very similar to what the locking lugs look like on a Johnson rifle. And I'll try and get you a picture of that too, so you can throw up there.
Wow.
So Eugene Stoner looked at Johnson and said, "Hey, that's a cool design. I like that. I'm gonna carry it on and look where it is nowadays."
That is pretty cool, and that's even further in the future.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it didn't catch on, but it did influence a lot. Jeez. I was always just annoyed that his machine gun was also the 1941 Johnson.
Yeah. Yeah. So that confused a lot of people when it came to the naming convention.
All right, so that is cool. All right, Frenchie, there's no way you can go older now.
It's older than what he just talked about, but it's not older than my musket. We're going from a pretty well-designed gun to a one that sounds okay on paper, but in actuality really sucks. So the next one I have is a 1882 Chaffee Reese rifle. So this one is a pretty obscure trial rifle from the U.S. This is during their 1884 trials of repeating firearms. So by this point, obviously, the trapdoor has been in service for about a decade at this point. But U.S. is messing around with ideas of repeating firearms. In this trial, you also have other guns like the Remington Lee and the Winchester Hotchkiss. And the third gun in it is going to be the Chaffee Reese. So this is designed by Reuben Chaffee and General James Reese in 1879. It's chambered in 45-70, so the same as the trapdoor is. However, obviously, it's designed to be a repeating rifle. So it's kind of a traditional bolt action. This one's a cock on close action. The bolt kind of is reminiscent a little bit of a Berdan rifle. It has like a really small cocking piece at the back, and then the bolt isn't exactly 90 degrees. It's not as weird an angle as a Berdan, but it's I'd say probably like an 80 degrees locking surface, which is kind of weird.
Yeah,
But
that's weird.
what's weird about this, instead of using like an internal box magazine, it uses a tube magazine, like a Spencer carbine. So it's loaded in the back through the buttstock of the rifle, which you have to do it. The way you have to do it is you have to have the bolt open to do it, and because the way. So obviously, two magazines at the time. There's a fear about obviously detonations of rounds touching each other under recoil. So the good idea on paper part of this is that the system it's like a weird ratchet system. It has like two kind of tracks in it. And so it's designed to actually hold the rounds apart from each other, so they're not touching when they're in the magazine.
Oh, that's good.
And the moving in the bolt. So the left ratchet holds the round in place, and the right ratchet, whenever you manipulate the bolt, moves back and forth. So it picks up a round and drags it forward, basically. And so it's just kind of this conveyor belt of moving rounds up and up into the action. Um, but obviously, like, sounds like a pretty complicated system. It is a complicated system.
And this is
So
this is all in the buttstock, you said, right? It goes
yeah,
down
this is
into the
all in
butt.
the buttstock of the rifle. So it's kind of like a backwards ramp leading into the chamber. It's kind of odd, especially looking at other firearms, because like with other tube loaders, like the Kropatschek designs, like the Lebel, it's the magazine's under the barrel. That's not the case with this. The magazine's behind the action,
All right, that's weird.
and so it's pulling it forward. But weirdly enough, this rifle is really heavy in the front, especially under like where the chamber is, and like the rear sight is extremely heavy. So the rifle itself is pretty small compared to like a Lee Enfield. It's I think maybe 2 inches longer. So it's a fairly short rifle for the period, but
Yeah. Ahead of
I
its
think it's
time.
only it's around 9 pounds, but it feels like 11 to 12. I imagine the weight in the front would probably counterbalance the weight of the buttstock when it's loaded, but when it's unloaded,
Yeah.
it's super unbalanced. Like the sights on it aren't great. So like I mentioned, they're designed in 1879. The two designers actually don't have any sort of factory or tooling themselves, so they actually had to contract this out to get it built. They originally talked to Colt, and Colt gave them an estimate of $150 per rifle and limited them to 200 rifles total. Which, if you look at the time, they were selling revolvers for like $20.
Yeah, that sounds expensive.
Yeah, so it's a huge price for people that you can imagine don't have a ton of money. So they reject. Oh,
Well, I was just gonna say that during my trapdoor research, which is right around this time, the government was making so many money decisions. It was just strictly money. So it was like, what's the cheapest one? That
exactly.
yeah. So all the trials that this gun was in, it came down to can we convert the old muskets? How much money can we save? And unfortunately, we were very cheap back then.
Yeah, I don't really see how you can convert something to this. So this would definitely have to be you shell out the money for a new design.
Yeah, so
Um,
they were like, fuck it, we'll just stick with the trapdoors.
yeah. So General James Reese, one of the designers, used his kind of army connections to get Springfield to make it for them. And Springfield offered to make it for about $56 a rifle, which is obviously it's still pretty expensive, but it's cheaper than what Colt was offering. Um, So the design's from 1879. The model's 1882. But one of the only markings you'll see on this rifle is it says U.S. Springfield 1884. That's just because most of them
Cool.
were made in 83, 84, but it's still technically the model of 82, because that's when they kind of finalized the contracts. So Springfield makes the contractor of those rifles. They only made 753 of them. So not a ton. I've seen somewhere that that's what the contract's number was supposed to be. I've seen it was supposed to be 1,000 rifles and never continued. I don't have the actual details on it because obviously, as you imagine,
Yeah, that's
super
so few. That's really
a
low.
super scarce trials rifle doesn't have a lot of detail about it. But yeah, it didn't do well at trials. It's a difficult system. It's difficult to clean. Like taking it apart is a nightmare. And honestly, even now, there's not anything how to take it apart. Stuff can break. The way to load it, like I said, you have to have the bolt open so stuff can get in the action. You have to load it through the buttstock. So soldiers were oftentimes putting the muzzle in the dirt to load it. Not the best idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, the mark on the receiver that says U.S. Springfield 1884, it has a small VP over an eagle on the barrel, and then it has the stock cartouche, the square one with 1884 in it that you see on a lot of trapdoors as well. It has like magazine cutoff like other rifles of the period, single loading.
Ah,
So the
cool.
magazine itself holds 5, and then you can throw a 6th one in the chamber, which I think is comparable to the other trials rifles, but like I said, the system's really complicated. It doesn't work well. They were prone to breaking a lot of times.
And how smooth is it when you just like jamming it open and closed?
Not really smooth. Like I said, it's a cock on close. It kind of takes a little bit of force, but it's not smoothed out like an Enfield is. It takes a good amount of force to close it.
Yeah,
And I
it's
imagine,
it's just an old school bullpup.
yeah. And firing black powder rounds, it's only going to get worse and worse each time you fire it.
Yeah, it's an internal bolt action bullpup.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that it's so. I love that it's so short, though. That's cool.
Yeah, it is. Like it's a handy size for the period, but it's just the fact that it's so heavy with such an odd design that it just doesn't lend itself to be a good rifle. After they came in basically last place in the trial, no, the U.S. was like, we don't want this thing. It's terrible. It breaks all the time. There was a lot of problems with cracking behind the tang, which mine actually has. It was cracked there, and someone repaired it. I don't know if that was done in period or someone that shot it recently, although I think it's more of a period thing. But so after they failed the trial, these were just sold on the surplus market, in which you can actually find catalogs with these in them.
Huh,
However,
like
it doesn't seem
Bannerman.
like the U.S. U.S. civilian market didn't seem to want them either, because obviously they failed trial in 1884, and you can find them for sale in catalogs until 1907, 1910, around there.
Did you say are they 4570?
Yeah, they're in 4570.
Wow, and people still didn't want them. That's funny.
No. But I mean, they're not. So there are only 753 of them were made, but they actually pop up a weird amount on the U.S. market. When I bought mine a couple years ago, I knew of 3 others at the time, so there's 4 for sale. Typically, they range around $3,000 to $4,000 is what you can get them for. I got mine on the cheaper end for that, which was nice.
Wow.
They don't have serials. There's kind of a weird caveat to that. So they don't have serials. However, I've seen a couple, including mine, that have a number carved into the stock, or else I carved. It's like an actual stamp of some kind. So I've seen one marked 11, mine's marked 15, and I've seen one marked 20. But again, these
Yeah,
I
maybe.
don't believe were marked from the factory, because there's ones without that number. So no idea where that number actually came from.
Yeah, that's weird. And these are like a candidate for being mislabeled as just like a Springfield rifle in some auction.
Yeah, you could definitely say. I mean, because all it says is U.S. Springfield.
Yeah, and you
So
see like
you
a
can easily just be
trapdoor
like,
sight.
oh, it's a Springfield of some kind.
And those being low numbers, like you said on the buttstock, those could be just speculation. They could be trial numbers too.
Yeah, very
Because
likely.
when you send a gun to trial, usually you send 10, 15, or 20 examples for breakages, for whatever it may be. So it could be, what number do you have on yours?
Mine's 15.
Yeah, so it could be the 15th out of 15 or the 15th out of 20 that was used at
Yeah.
trial, maybe. Very, very possible there.
I don't think mine got a ton of use because the barrel is an absolute mirror on the inside. So
Cool.
obviously, it's super sought after piece by some people that want like really rare experimental stuff, but obviously didn't see a lot of use in its life.
No, that's awesome. I don't see any of these for sale, so good for you.
Yeah.
Shit.
I think out of the 3 in that trial, this one is by far the least made because the other ones they have like a couple thousand at least made of them, and you can find some of them even have different models. Like the Remington Lee's probably the most well known, and then Winchester Hotchkiss you can find like carbine versions of them.
There's one with
Especially
which is the one with the knob on the side?
that's the Winchester Hotchkiss.
The Hotchkiss. Yeah, that I see that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, which I
early
think
U.
that's the 70
Expensive.
model. I want to say.
Yeah, early U.S. breeders are wild.
Yeah, because it's that weird period
Expensive.
of the U.S. trying to decide if it wants to adopt one, but then it's like we don't want to spend the money. So at the end of the trial, they decide that none of the designs are really worth it, and they just keep with the trapdoor.
Right. It took up to smokeless powder to change their minds.
Yeah, it's not until you get the crag that they finally like, okay, we should probably get him some
Right,
sort of
we'll
magazine rifle. But
change.
Yeah, I
it would be
guess.
interesting to see. Like it would have been interesting to see if like something as complicated as this got adopted. How long would it last? Probably not very long, in my opinion.
Right. All the tube magazines were going at that point.
Yeah, especially like one that's loaded through the buttstock. Weird ratchet
Shit.
system. Yeah, it's odd.
That's funny. All right, Kelman, you're up.
All right, this one might be the most mass produced of any of them. Well, I know so far, but maybe overall.
Ooh.
So my next one is a World War One. It is a 1916 dated. It is an airfreight made Car 98A, and our buddy Michael here actually helped me get this one, and it's turned into one of my favorites just because of its overall condition and the fact that it has a stamp on the buttstock that denotes that it was repaired by a depot in World War One. So it's a number two. It's the Kustrin Depot, which is located, I think, in like eastern Germany, like east of Berlin. And it's not particularly rare or anything. I mean, they made like 1.7 million of these or something like that in World War One. But the rifle, the Carnate 8As are like super cool looking rifles. They're very kind of steampunkish, but they have like the full wood covering of the barrel and everything. They have like the little checkered bolt handle and the scallop stock and the weird kind of.
They should have made a lot more of them.
Yeah, they're short, they're handy. That has like the weird front sight with the bayonet lug and the little stacking rod thing. And they're a super cool looking rifle, super handy. This one shoots excellently. I like the sights so much better than the Gewehr 98. And this one, it's like a very honest example. It hasn't been like refinished or anything, so it has like a nice patina on the metal. The wood has plenty of dings and dents. I don't think it's been sanded. And the depot repair, so there's a few parts that have been renumbered, but it's only a few of them. So those were depot repaired numbers. So the original serial number is 2870, no letter prefix. And the bolt got replaced, but they only renumbered the bolt handle. So the rest of the small parts on the bolt match each other, so they're all from the original bolt. So they only did the bolt handle, and then they replaced the magazine floor plate and like the trigger guard. And in typical German efficiency fashion, they picked a trigger guard that already had an 8, so they only had to stamp the 2, the 7, and the 0. And they re-stamped them with some force. Like this guy had a heavy hand when he re-stamped the numbers. And I think that was the only parts that were replaced on this thing. I think the stock's still original because it's the right type for when it was made, and it has the original serial number on it. It doesn't look re-stamped. And on the stock, you can tell this thing caught some shrapnel at some point because there's
Whoa.
very, very specific like holes like straight through the wood that you wouldn't get from like a whole lot of other damage. I'm assuming. I mean, I can never prove it, but it looks like something you would see with shrapnel damage. And there's some big old gouges that were probably sanded smooth when it got the depot repair. So there's like some chunks of wood missing, and it's all in the same area. And there's some pretty significant dings on the front barrel band, like the hinge kind of clamp over barrel band the Carnate 8As have. And it's the original matching barrel band, so it was originally there. It's got some pretty neat dings in there. So my theory
Wow,
is
that's
this one caught some shrapnel and broke like the trigger guard, lost the magazine floor plate, and I guess somehow the bolt got damaged or lost, and it made its way back to the depot for repair and then continued serving. So it's just a really good, honest example of a World War I rifle that more than likely saw some action, and also the beautiful tiger stripe stock. So thanks to Michael for helping me get this one.
And a
Yeah.
short Mauser, 30 years or so, a little less from the K98.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one in the shop, and I was like, "Dang, that's a nice one for the price that they had there." And then I just remember taking all the pictures and reaching out to you about it. And
Oh yeah.
What was the year make you said?
That's a 1916 Airfare.
Ah,
yeah, it's an honest depot rework. So that's what was cool about it. It wasn't just like a mismatch that someone threw a barrel band on it or whatever it is back in the day in your garage,
Yeah,
for spare parts.
definitely. So this one came back. It's pretty much as it was when it served in World War One, most likely. And I guess I don't really know if I have a tip for getting these, but they're not as expensive as people make them out. People make them out to be like, oh, some super high dollar rare thing, but you just gotta be patient and search around and find a good, decent example.
I would say maybe a tip for that one is it's kind of the opposite of a Gewehr 98 when it comes to the bluing of the receiver versus the
Oh,
bolt
that's right.
and everything.
Ah.
A lot of people I've run into think it's supposed to be like the Gewehr 98, where the receiver is supposed to be in the white as well. Where on the Car 98A, the receiver is actually blued. So I've run into people who thought the opposite of that, and they probably missed out on a few deals because they thought it was refinished or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's not confusing.
Yeah. And I guess another tip, for some reason I've seen a weird number of these posted on the Milsurp subreddit of people finding ones that have been sporterized and thinking they're going to be able to go and restore them, which it's more doable with like a Car 98K or like a Gewehr 98, but these
Right.
parts are even less easy to find, so don't bother with that.
Right. That stacking rod screws up the whole front of the stock.
Yeah, and the stocks you can find Polish stocks here and there, but they're still not quite exactly the same. So yeah, just spend the money on a complete one.
Right. I've seen people almost buy a Polish one thinking it was the German one because it was marked as the German one.
Yeah, and if you want one for a few hundred less than a German one, you can get a Spanish Civil War used Polish one.
Right. Just the only thing is the crest is all scrubbed.
Yep.
Which, if you want a nice cheap one, get that. People can't tell across the room on your wall,
I know.
Yes,
I can
so
tell.
just have a wall, and that way you can't tell.
It's that time again for America's favorite trivia game, not Jeopardy, Milsurp Trivia. So I will present to you folks some Milsurp firearm-related questions on the topic, which is interesting Milsurp. And as always, this is just a fun way to bring up some firearm-related topics and present some random cool facts and information to the listeners. So we will keep score this time, though. We usually don't keep score, but the public has spoken. They want us to keep score. So let's see who knows their interesting Milsurp. Here we go on the first one. These are all 100 and these are 200 because they're probably all the same difficulty. Rock Island Arsenal updated their 1903 rifles a few times over the years. First, when they introduced the improved heat treatment at serial number 285, and then when they started using receivers made of this alloy at serial number 319921, a full 10 years before Springfield started using it. Tick tock. All right, I see Frenchie. I got Holmes. All right, Sam, last guy. All right, the answer is nickel steel.
Got it.
Now, Sam had the improved nickel
Right.
stuff. Are we going to give it to him?
Sure.
It's a steel alloy. I'll give it to him.
NS
Yeah,
nickel stuff.
It's a language
Frenchie, you have
barrier.
the steel. You don't have the nickel part. I don't know. Do I give it to you?
What, do they make it out of copper beforehand?
They did blow up, so probably.
I'll give it to you on that one.
They
Everyone got it. All right. Nice multiple choice one here. Mosin, the guns have been fired with or rechambered in decent numbers by a few folks over the years, including the Supreme Master Bubba Bannerman. And so many examples have been found that can fire all of these calibers except this. So what have you seen a number of Mosins in except? Oh, we got some quick answers here.
Quickest answer in the West.
I'm going to tell you right now. Kelly got it right.
Heyo.
Frenchie, Sam, and Home. Everyone got it right. Correct.
Hey.
You guys know your
Nice.
Mosins.
All right, now I'm gonna make one in that caliber, so this question is no longer relevant.
You're wrong. My grandfather.
Practically everyone loses points.
Well, yeah, you guys know your Mosins. That's very nice. All right, there's two answers on this. The cute and handy Argentine 1891 Mausers are so small that they look like rifles for children, but they were still effective and famously came in two different carbine variants, the standard carbine and this one, with the primary difference being the addition of this. What did they add? And what is its name? Ooh. Browning, you're in.
Nailed it.
Ooh, ooh. Frenchie, you have an answer?
Not really. Say that.
What about you, Sam?
Give me 10 more seconds to come up with some bullshit.
Are those metric or standard seconds?
Well, the only one that got it was Kelly. It was a bayonet mount,
Heyo.
and it was the engineer's carbine.
Yeah, they look
Mhm.
fucking weird.
So yeah, look,
Yeah, I knew it was the engineer, but
They also had the I think they had the shuffle bayonet for these.
yeah, look how weird it has to hook on there and there.
If I remember right, they had a bayonet, or they had a thing that was a shovel that was attached to this bayonet attachment, so they could dig trenches and shit.
yeah, like a troll bayonet
Yeah.
or whatever it is, or
Trowel, like a digger. All right, multiple choice.
What'd you call them?
The Luger POA, produced in several models and by several nations from 1898 to 1949, is also known as the pistol parabellum and the parabellum pistol. But parabellum stems from the Latin phrase "si vis pacem parabellum," which means this.
I don't speak Spanish.
So, what does the "si pacem parabellum" translate to? All right, we got our answers. Everyone went with the same one. It is D. Congrats, everybody.
nice.
Yeah, the other ones, some were real, some were bullshit.
I
Well,
like
I beat that.
the E. Like, to end war, we must be one. Like, I must somehow end war.
You never know with the Latin phrases.
It's true. They're pretty funky.
From one many. All right. The crew of the boxcar, the B-29 boxcar, was not intending to target Nagasaki, but cloud cover forced the commander to reroute the attack from its intended objective, this city, which housed one of, if not the most important military munitions factory of the Japanese. So what city that is related to Japanese milsurp was supposed to be bombed till they hung a left and went to Nagasaki? All right. I got 2. I got 3.
I think that's
Sam's is in. The answer is Kokorat. But now,
Nice.
was the original name Kyoto, or is that a different place?
No, I think I just mixed it
That's a
up.
different
I
place.
knew it was something with K, but
Yeah.
I couldn't think of Kokura.
And
Kyoto was a target, but like one of the war ministers or something like that in the U.S. was like, "Oh, I went there on my honeymoon. It's pretty nice. Don't bomb it."
Oh yeah,
They're like, "Okay."
does anyone remember which plant was very close to being hit? But it was very close to Hiroshima, and it was in a small valley, and it survived and housed victims. It's not a trivia question; it's just a bonus.
Mm,
That's my first 99 at Toyo Kogyo.
okay.
They were very close, but there was like some valley or something, and most of the wave went right over them. I'm sure it was still pretty bad. All right, multiple choice. Toyota.
Uh-oh.
We brought up the Toyota, but they made automobiles in 33, and in 37 the company split up, and the automobile department went off, became the one we know. But the other part was making bayonets using this symbol. Which one is the Toyota symbol?
I know it's one of those.
It's definitely one of these 6. All right, I got one. Last one, French. Oh, you guys all got it.
Hey,
Very nice. Very nice.
Dang.
I knew Buckton, I knew Jensen.
I was going to describe them, but it's very difficult to describe these. A top and a diamond and. All right. During World War I, even with the adoption of the M1917 and increased 1903 production, the U.S. had a shortage of rifles with which to train recruits and draftees across the country with, some being issued only broomsticks to drill with. So obsolete Krags were called back into service, and a number of Remington and Westinghouse Mausers were purchased. But even so, the Army sought additional training rifles, and another source from above became available. This rifle, and the U.S. purchased 20,000, all reconfigured into the same model. This model, the most widest issued variant of this rifle. So, what rifle did they get? In what model were they all put back into? Ooh, nice. I got 2. I got 3.
feel like
Yeah,
mine was
I'm not going to
kind
deal
of a
with
guess.
the stars too much. I'll leave off stars. That's bad enough.
They kind of gave it away, at least a little.
Oh,
Yeah.
true. Well, I think they knew. All right,
There was a hint in the question.
doesn't matter. He got it. Someone got it wrong though. It was the Mark II,
Oh.
Ross Mark II.
not the Mark III. They took the Mark IIIs and if they had them and made them back into Mark IIs, which is pretty odd.
Dang.
About half the Ross rifles went to the state of New York. The remaining went to 5,000 each camp. Got 5,000 each. And then they said it was really dirty, and that's why the Canadians took them out. They said once they got dirty, they were pieces of shit. So Sam and Brown and Kelly.
Ayo.
Dang.
Speaking of Ross, no one knows this. The lever on the right side of the
Oh.
Ross that you pull down
Yeah.
like this guy's doing could be depressed to make loading a tad easier, and you drop in the rounds. And what was this system known as? A, the Ross ramp. B, the Harris controlled platform magazine. C, the Ripley elevator. D, the Hague magazine. Or E, the Dunning-Kruger lift.
I have no idea.
So yeah, there's a
Wait, scroll,
button here. You pull it.
scroll up.
There you
Scroll up.
go. What is the name of the fancy elevator that never went on another rifle ever again? Could be any of these.
Could
Gotta
be.
take-
I don't even know. I got the last question wrong, so I don't even know if I should even try.
Come on.
Yeah, this is a total guess on my part.
All right.
Wait, give me
Mike,
1 sec.
You're the last one.
Why not?
You ready? It's the
Go.
B,
Oh,
Hey.
yeah.
Harris control. Everyone got it but Michael.
Aw.
I wouldn't need
Yeah.
to give.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, bring it out. Bring it
I'll
out.
put it
He
in.
probably put it wasn't the Dunning-Kruger
Yeah,
one?
Dunning-Kruger he went with there.
I'll say this: both questions refer to the Mark II, which is the inferior to the Mark III.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So,
But it's the one I have, so it's the one I know most about and have the most links to. So look, it's
yeah, my main focus is to get a Mark III this year, or try to. So,
Yeah, Ross is
good one.
definitely on my list.
a good one, not a
it says
crappy sporterized one.
just throw them in the magazine. At the same time, with the left hand, move the platform magazine up and down. This will arrange the cartridges so that they easily feed. You can load up to 5 as fast as you can load 2 in any other rifle.
All right, need a video on testing that.
Right, we should.
It's so good it made it. It's so good it made it to the Mark III, but not.
But nope. That's funny. All right. Interesting milsurp. The rarest Mosin they got might be this pre-World War I carbine model, often faked or mislabeled. It was produced in small numbers from 1910 through 1917 for cavalry engineers, signalers, and artillerymen, and was stocked nearly to the front sight, and so did not take any bayonet. And I don't even see these for sale.
I have seen one in person. at
Yeah, one
Tulsa.
or two.
Ooh. All right, I got 2 answers. I got 3 answers. All right. It is the model 1907. My question, of course, are these around? Because a lot of rare shit today, but I definitely don't see these that much.
Yeah,
I've
they're
seen
not
like
around.
one or two for sale.
I've seen one in person, one online.
I lost out on the 3 a few months ago.
So everyone got it, but Poor Frenchie. All right, one more. And it looks like it's going to be tough. Oh, wait. Sam could get it and Kelly could get it wrong, and it's worth 200. Production numbers for the 1907 Mosin Nagant we just mentioned, are estimated at, there's two patterns. One has no reinforcing bolt, and one has a bolt. So how many were made, you think? Were there almost 1 million, under 100,000, at 100,000, maybe 600? I'm thinking there's only like 20 of them based on how much I see, but there's at least there's at least 47,000.
I don't even know.
I have no idea.
Oh, so this is a good way. We don't know. Kelly could get
I
it
changed
wrong.
I changed my answer, so I'm probably gonna regret that.
Oh shit. All right. Yep.
Also, yeah, Tom, I should be at 700, so just throwing that out there.
Kill
You
issue.
cheating again?
No, that's right.
All right.
But this one, I have no idea.
All right. Frenchie boy's in. Kelly's in.
I guess not the right one.
Sam's in. I think we got a lot of different answers. Oh wait. Mike, you did it? Oh, he's in.
There we
Here
go.
we go. I think everyone has like a different answer. It is D300.
Damn.
Okay.
Uh-oh. So wait, Mike got it.
Well, so I think I read it wrong then, your answers, because I meant to do the one that was total 34,000 or 344,000. So I put
Yeah.
C,
Wrong.
which is what I read that as.
Oh wait, it should be C.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's C. Oh wait, shit.
Damn it,
I
Tom.
changed it. No, hold on. It's C. This is the right answer. This is the right answer. All right, so
I
wait.
thought the total was the answer.
I must have renumbered, re-lettered where it was.
Oh,
It's definitely 344.
Okay, so that's the one I was
Dang
going
it.
So
for.
So I'm sorry. The answer is C. So that is just Frenchie.
All right, I'll take it.
You serious?
So Kelly still holds on.
Oh,
Hey.
That
snap.
puts me in last place now.
Even if we put it in there, you're still down 100. That's okay. Kelly, congrats.
Hey, still the champ.
Some applause here. All right. My last one here is a Belgian 8916 carbine Mauser, of course. It's chambered at 7.65 by 53 and another 5-round single stack detachable box magazine ahead of its time. Even though it was made in 1916, it still maintained the early Mauser cock on close action. And this particular one still has the barrel shroud that they stole from the Gewehr 88. That's definitely stolen from them. But it's a carbine, so it's a nice handy size. It's like 3 feet long, super light. And besides the cock on close, it's a really nice one. And my example, though, what makes it interesting is that it was made at the Birmingham Arsenal in the UK in 1916. And if you try to research how many were made, they said the records were terrible. They were trying to work in secret, so lots of correspondence was lost. They only estimate like 20 to 30,000 at best. But it's not just that they were made in Birmingham. The cool story is that I guess it starts with the Germans rolled through and forced the Belgians in a short period to evacuate, including FN and MAE, their major artillery and arms factories. And some went to France, some went to the UK. And the UK tried the right thing. They tried to buy some rifles at first to arm their remaining troops. And the only one that offered was the Frenchie. You're nice French. They offered them some Gras and Labels, though. And they were like, all right. They said they had ammo issues with that. So then they said, all right, let's just make our own. They asked all the USA companies, and they're all making P14s and Mosins and Berthiers and 1895 Winchesters. And so they were all busy. The UK's busy with SMLEs. The company in the UK said they'll do it. W.W. Greener. They were like a small, fancy, like shotgun and sporting arms company. And they too didn't have the capability to do such a large order, but they tried. And, it got pretty bad. They made a very few rifles, and they were mostly rejected. So the Belgians said, fuck this. We're going to do it ourselves. Got the UK's help. They got out of the contract and bought all of the machinery and all the workers from Greener. I think Greener made money. So that's funny for doing a poor job. But since so many Belgians ended up in the UK, this Birmingham company was almost entirely Belgian refugee arms workers, mainly from FN and MAE. So in a short time, they were up and running. The one caveat though was they realized that Greener had all shitty equipment. Apparently, they had to fix all the equipment.
Funny.
But but after that, because they had all their experts there, it only took a couple of months. They were up and running, and they say the quality was just as good as FN. I don't know if that's true. Doesn't look like it from my Birmingham example, but it is an interesting, cool thing that they were able to get an entire factory up and running and putting out 2,000 rifles a month and made about 70,000 before the end of the war. And lest we forget that the even though the Belgians mostly evacuated, they had a nice chunk of people still there. They needed guns, and
Yeah,
so
but those
oh,
factory workers got a good setup. Then they got
yeah,
to get
put up
out of
with the
there,
whole town.
keep working. Yeah, go to the UK.
They kept saying they didn't speak the same language, so that was tough. But the UK were very nice and housed everybody and welcomed them.
Yeah, I've yet to shoot my 89-16, but I got ammo for it. I'm waiting for it, and I think my next range trip is going to find itself in there because I really want to.
They're pretty punchy. Surprisingly so, even for a 7.65.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's true.
7.65 knocks you back quite a bit.
And it's also kind of odd that this was made in 1916 and Mauser already perfected the Mauser. You know, the 98 was already out, and they still went with making what they knew because they wanted to repair also, and they had interchangeable parts and whatnot. But that's a pretty big difference. A 98 Mauser and the Car 98 that you just showed, you know, that's kind of odd. And
They're
there's not
pretty
many
tight,
cool.
though.
Oh, sorry.
I said they're pretty tight though. I really like the one I have.
Yeah, they're pretty cool, and maybe you can relate to this tip. The tip there's not really many cool markings on there. It's just the standard Mauser. It says Birmingham on there. But when you're don't forget, there's plenty of bayonets that say Belgian bayonet or Belgian carbine bayonet, but there's a lot of variations because the carbine wasn't standardized at first, and then there's the 8936s that have no barrel shroud. So when buying a bayonet, double check that it's the one for your 8916.
Yep, I made that mistake because
Yeah.
It's the barrel ring, right?
Yeah,
That connects to
Yep.
it.
they pressed a ring into the barrel ring of the bayonet to fit the later ones. So you have to find one that doesn't have that ring inside of it.
Yeah, I think it's like 15 millimeters or 13 millimeter size. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah, you have to get pictures of that barrel ring to see if you can see the pressed part in there, or have someone measure it for you to make sure. Because I've run into that issue too, where I've asked people and they wouldn't measure it for me or whatever. So I just said, "Screw you! I'll go to the next guy," and I still haven't found a bayonet for it yet.
Yeah, I'm still looking. Everyone's an 8936 one.
Yeah, it's super common that, or that one, and yeah, every seller I've come
Or the
across,
35, the FN 35, whatever it is, the 35 that they made too.
Yeah, there's a
Mhm.
35 and a 36,
Yeah.
and both are wrong for the 16.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So that's
Yeah.
that's my Belgian.
When my friend said he had a Belgian bayonet, he worked the gun show table, so I took my rifle there to make sure the bayonet fit first before I bought it.
That's not a New York thing. Took my
Texas
rifle
only.
there.
Took it to the gun show. Does this fit? Click. All right, yeah, I'll take it.
All right, let's see if Sammy takes another audible.
Yeah, so last one I picked is one of the crown jewels of my collection, because a Serbian 1899 is just not good enough. My very last one is a Romanian contract model of 1893, a Mannlicher export rifle, sequestered at
we
the start of the war by Austria-Hungary.
We said we weren't here to
then-
flex, sir.
This is what this episode is about, so I brought the big guns.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, it was then converted to 8x50 millimeter rimmed. So this is it actually got a new designation when this was done. So the official designation in Austria-Hungary would be 8 mm M93 adaptiertes rumänisches Repetiergewehr, which just rolls off the tongue. And
That's
it
what I
basically means
thought.
That's my
8
nickname.
mm M93 adapted Romanian repeating rifle. to just make it clear that these are adapted to 8x50mm rimmed, because at the start of the war, Steyr was still in the process of building and shipping Romania's latest contract of 1914. So the idea was to actually ship it out that year. However, when the war started, I think 84,000 rifles were still in storage, either completed or part way completed. So they were basically all sequestered into army inventory and then given out to second line troops. Those that were already completed usually stayed in the original caliber, which is 6.5 by 53mm rimmed. And those that were partway completed oftentimes were converted to 8x50mm rimmed, which was the standard cartridge of Austria-Hungary, in order to alleviate supply issues.
Was it cut down also?
Yes, and so the remaining contracts were both infantry length rifles and carbines, and both were sequestered. So you have short ones and long ones. I do have both. However, my short example is kind of weird in the sense that it does not have the correct front sight, and it has a straight bolt handle, whereas a true carbine would have had a bent one. So it's kind of strange, and I assume this one was maybe one of the last ones that were just thrown together from spare parts. So maybe it got a carbine barrel and a rifle bolt.
Right.
I don't know, but it's cool regardless. And yeah, so in order to adapt this rifle to 8x50mm rim, they had to change a few things. Not a lot, but a few things. So the magazine was increased in strength. So there's a little metal bar that differentiates it from a normal Romanian rifle. The sights were actually switched out for the M95 sights. So they are the exact same markings and ranges. So they are also not graduated in meters, but in Schritt. A Schritt is exactly 0.75 meters for everyone who's interested in that.
We're Americans. What's a meter?
A meter is about 1.09 yards, I think,
Yeah,
is
it's
the
around there.
conversion. So a yard is about 90% of a meter. If you
That's
want a quick conversion, that's it.
Yeah.
Actually,
It's
if you want a quick conversion, a meter is one M16. There you go.
Oh, perfect. That I can relate to.
Yeah.
Tom, that's about 4 hot dogs.
You're right.
You don't get M16s up there.
Unless it's a Nerf gun. That's funny. Sorry to cut
Yeah.
you off. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just it's almost 4 a.m. here, so I'm trooping
Sorry.
through.
Sorry. Good.
No, it's all right. And important about these is that you actually also load them with the M95 clip. So the magazine was changed to also take these, unlike the normal Romanian rifles that have their own proprietary clip. Although they do share it with the Dutch rifles because they also share a caliber. But you can load them like any M95. So basically, it was almost entirely changed to the M95 way of operation, except that it's a turnbolt rifle. And what's also interesting about the model of 1893 is that it was one of the last rifles that I'm aware of that were adopted in the smokeless era that still featured a side-mounted bayonet.
Oh, wow.
So it does
Yes.
have a very modern knife-style bayonet, a short one, but it's mounted sideways. I don't know why.
Wow.
They also kept that style of bayonet for these sequestered rifles. That wasn't changed. The barrel also wasn't changed. It was simply bored out. So you can use a Romanian bayonet on a sequestered rifle. The barrel isn't thick or anything.
And was there any worry going from 6.5 to 8mm?
No, the action is more than strong enough.
Wow.
The rifles were actually well liked in the field, so they were accurate, well made, and they are incredibly smooth. So the model 1893 is derivative of the Gewehr 88. So with a few adaptations that were made in style, they're very smooth, and it's also the smoothest rifle I own, I think.
Nice.
And if you
Wow.
want to,
Smoother
yeah,
than the Greek.
Yeah.
I do. Greek rifles, yes, and it might be due to wear that they are not as smooth. But the Romanian just takes the cake. I'm sorry. I love the Greek
Wow.
rifles, but it just takes the cake. I will try to get you a video. It's stupid smooth. Even when loaded with ammo, so it's not just working the bolt on an empty rifle, but even when you load rounds, it's very smooth.
That's crazy. And even with modifications and all that.
Yeah. And
Wow.
the main giveaway when you look at it initially, so we're presuming that you don't immediately see that the magazine is slightly changed and the sights aren't slightly changed either, is that unlike the rifles that were delivered to Romania, it does not have the Romanian crest on the receiver, which is very sad because it's a beautiful crest. It simply has the model designation. And if you take the upper handguard off, there will be an Austro-Hungarian acceptance stamp, always from the Vienna arsenal. So it will be WN14 for the year it was accepted into Austro-Hungarian service, which it normally wouldn't have. So these are the main giveaways of sequestered rifles.
And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's
and is that worth more money? I guess it is. Now, isn't it a nice capture rifle that was
Well,
taken and then reissued against their enemy?
the Romanians are already rare to find.
yeah,
Serious.
it's kind of weird here because you almost encounter the 8x50 mm versions more often than the correct ones, but in other countries they are exceedingly rare. I know a few people that have never seen one in the US, so I assume if I were to move this to the US, it would go for some good change.
Man, that's a nice one. I'm looking at the
So yeah,
photos.
I think that's one of my most interesting rifles. I think I have an interesting collection, but that one is certainly up there.
I love it. I'm not gonna get one, but I'll just look from afar. So
Gotta visit.
it's too much.
You didn't even show me it when I visited. Sad.
Yep.
I didn't have time. You should have stayed longer.
I should have, honestly. Should just made
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you should
He
have.
didn't even show you his pride and joy. Can't believe it. An ass.
Well, I mostly keep it in a dark room like a cave goblin because I don't want others to enjoy things I enjoy.
It's true.
He
I
has
get
to
that.
answer riddle first to get in.
Exactly.
All right, Micah, what do you got, man?
All right, so we're going interwar period now, and I'll talk
Oh,
about the Scoti Model X, which is a prototype rifle
shit.
made from our favorite recent importers, all the Carcanos that recently came in. So, although it is Italian, it's technically not a Carcano. So,
Come on.
think back to the 30s, between the wars, semi-auto stuff is coming straight from World War One. Everybody wants it; it's the cool new thing. So the Italians want to get on board, so they do trials for about a few years throughout the 30s, all the way up to 39. And the Scoti Model X is one of those prototype semi-auto rifles, that full-length rifles that they want to use. So it was developed in around 1934 by Alfredo Scoti, from the Mita Brescia factory. He was one of the main gun designers there. They made about 250 of these. Again, these are just prototypes. They did see some small service for field trials here and there for actual use, but only about 250 were made.
Wow, that's so little.
And yeah, and so they built these in around 1932-33. So that's kind of where the X comes from, the Scoti Model X, based off of the fascist calendar. So 1922 plus 10 for the Roman numeral X gets you around 1932-33, and then 1934 is when they introduce it. So there was a Scoti Model IX before that, so 9. And then all these, they had barrels made at Tourney in 1933, so you'll see them labeled as 1933, even though they weren't introduced until 1934. But essentially, it was just a semi-auto tube version of a 1891 Carcano, where they actually wanted to use as many parts as they could. So they took the base stock, the magazine, the rear sight, the front sight, the barrels, were all taken from the 1891 Fucile, and they also
Yeah,
used
that's why everyone calls it a Carcano.
yeah, and they used the 6-round end block clip chambered in 6.5. So they wanted to use as many parts as they could. The biggest thing about these was
6 rounds. It's only 6 rounds.
only 6 rounds. It's just use the standard 6.5.
Oh shit! I
end
thought there
block.
was some extended thing there. Oh
Nope,
no!
that's just a Carcano magazine.
You can go through that quick.
Yeah, so that
Yeah, it's like the RS. Only 6
yeah,
rounds.
just like the RSC for you over there. It's you go through it pretty quick with that. That space that you see between the trigger, the trigger ring and the magazine, that kind of throws you off a little bit too. But what's really interesting about this specific prototype rifle is it fires from the open bolt compared to the closed bolt. So open bolt you mainly see more in submachine guns, machine guns, but he decided to use an open bolt, so that brings up accuracy issues, that brings up dirt getting up in the action when loading, unloading, all that stuff. So that really kind of was the shortfall of that open bolt system. And it used a short stroke piston that was underneath the barrel. So if you actually take the stock off, you can see a piston rod that runs the length of the barrel all the way to the magazine area. But it's a short stroke, so it only moves for about a few millimeters actually to force the action back on a spring. Then the other weird thing about it is, and I figured this out a little late when I first tried to fire it, is you actually have to lube the bullets in order to fire. Because for open bolt systems like that, for early semi-auto prototypes, in order to extract, you have the round or the case has to be lubed up before. So I didn't know that going into it. So the first time I tried to fire it, I went through about 5 or 6 rounds of just straight pull, trying to straight pull bolt action, trying to figure out why it's not doing it. And then I did a little bit more research and finally found out I needed to actually lube the cases before firing. And then once I did that, it flawlessly. So
that's funky. Well, I guess it's kind of like the Breda Model 30 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the reason why you see the rounds being lubed, because prior Italian machine guns, they used lubed rounds, so Scotti decided to keep that going. Not sure why. Kind of becomes an issue down the road. But when it comes down to it, so they had the trials in 1939 where the Scotti was put up against the Breda M35 PG and the Armaguerra 39. Ultimately, the Armaguerra 39 won out the contract, and they made some of those rifles. But ultimately, the semi-auto prototype venture for the Italians didn't really go too far throughout the war, as war broke out more, and they just need to pump out as many Carcanos as possible to arm and supply everybody they could.
It's just crazy that they stuck with the 6 rounds.
Oh yeah. Yeah, one of the orders that came down was they wanted to use as many similar parts to the current production line. So that's why you see so many similarities between a standard 1891 Carcano and the Scotti.
Wow.
Yeah, I do love how it just looks like exactly like a Carcano 1891 that someone just fucked with to make semi-auto, which is pretty much what it is.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And other than Ian from Forgotten Weapons, I believe I have one of the only videos of someone actually firing them. However, it's not posted to YouTube, so I can't totally claim that.
No, I've never seen it. I have seen it, but
I know I can't get over the 6 rounds. I'd be like, clip, give me clip. Anyone got clips?
I mean,
I'm out.
Everybody loves the M1 Graham, but it was only 2 more rounds.
True.
Like in the long run. So, and they were just using what they had at the time. So, unless you went with a detachable box magazine, that was the option at the time.
Yeah. And I think but the Armaguerra was, I think I shot that in a video game. I think that was 6 as well. So that was it. Wow,
Oh
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Only about 250 were made, so you can still see. I think there's probably 12 or 14 in the U.S. Off the top of my head that I've seen before that I know of in private hands. So not many made it back, and if they did make it back, it made it back in parts. So
Yeah, I
not
was gonna
really
say.
many out there.
I guess all of them that are in the U.S. are probably bringbacks.
Yeah, they have to be, or they're brought back for trials like at like Aberdeen Proving Grounds and all that post-war.
Were they ever issued out of like desperation or anything, or were they
Yeah,
just like, captured
they
in a
did
factory
do.
or something?
They did field trials with them. So out of the 250, I don't have a number on field trials, but they pushed out a decent amount of that 250 out to the field just because they wanted to get field trials and test real combat testing. So there is evidence of them out there being used in combat. Just not very few, or not very many. I mean,
That's pretty cool. Imagine being that guy. Here you go. Here's this weird thing. Figure it out.
so and since there was only 250 made, I mean, technically mine is a low serial number as well. So just depends on how you look at it.
Just for the record, when I knew you have this, so I looked it up, and there's no Wikipedia entry at all.
There
for the
is one. It's in Italian though.
code. So, well, maybe it's time you get in there, make it a count, be the first one for an English one.
Yeah, there is one, and it's in Italian, so you have to translate it, and it's not very good in the sense of it's very it jumps around a lot. It's a lot of speculation, and there's not that much material out there about these guns in the first place. So just because it was a prototype that never got formally adopted.
Man.
Yeah.
All right, so we all got some rare shit. Well, you guys have some rare shit. So
Most of my other stuff's pretty vanilla too. It's just, hey, here's a grand in 1903, a Mosin, a couple of different Mosins, yeah. So
Very good. Grand number 1. All right, Frenchie, you're up, bud.
All right, I guess we're keeping the rare experimental prototype trial rifles going.
Uh-oh.
Ooh, all right.
So my last one is a French 1862 Chassepot trial rifle. So obviously the name Chassepot has become, especially lately, a lot of people know about them. They know about the 1866 model. This is the model that France took into the Franco-Prussian War. However, there were actually a couple of versions beforehand that are pretty much unknown to especially the English-speaking world. There's a little bit of research in French in some out-of-print books, but again, they're out of print, so they're really hard to get copies of now. But so to kind of like back up and give a little history, so invented by Anton Chassepot. He's born in Mutzig in Alsace-Lorraine. His dad works at the Mutzig Arsenal, and his uncle also is the controller at Châtellerault. And from an early age, he's into firearms development. He actually helps with the Arcillon musketoons that you've probably seen the video or at least the stills of Ian holding this short little French musketoon rifle with this massive sword bayonet that's longer than the actual rifle is itself. In which the 1862 Chassepot, and actually it's also its predecessor, there's one in 1858. They both, I think, take a lot of inspiration from that gun. And so, unlike, it's still technically a bolt action design, but this is very much more a conversion of French muskets to a breech loading gun than the Chassepot, the formal Chassepot that's adopted by the French military. That one's just kind of a from the ground up design. This is to convert old French muskets. So it's very much still in that 1853 model French musket, but it now it still uses a percussion cap system, which I think is a really cool kind of difference.
So
By this point,
the regular Chassepot, the first one that was 1866.
so that's the one that's formally adopted is 1866. The first, like his first prototype version is 1858.
Wow. Okay.
And then so there's 3 prototype versions. There's one in 1858, 1862, which is my version, and then there's one in 1865. Which they're all very similar, to some slight modifications to it from what I know. The 66 model, the one that's formally adopted, is the one that kind of changes a lot of things. And that comes from Napoleon III himself, dictating that he wants the new rifle to be a needle fire rifle. All the prototypes before that aren't needle fire; they're basically just musket conversions using still the percussion cap system, but just adding a way to load into the breech to make it faster. So for the prototype models, they have this super small left-handed bolt to them.
That's
That
weird.
it has this. So in order to open it, you actually have to half cock the rifle, and then there's a little kind of knurled tab that you press. And so it being left-handed, you would think obviously it'd be kind of weird to manipulate the bolt, but it's actually quite easy to do with your right hand. You just use the kind of outside of your finger to press it, and then just pull the bolt back with your hand at the same time. Because at this time, France was looking at breech loading as a thing for the cavalry to use, because obviously we're loading a musket or a muzzle loading weapon on horseback is extremely difficult. So their idea is, let's get something handy that can be breech loading to give to the cavalry. So a lot of these trials for these early chassepos are actually just cavalry based, including for this one. I don't have an actual number how many got issued out, but it's basically only to cavalry trials at the very beginning. It's not until the later model, the 1866, that they start doing infantry model testing with it.
Now,
Yes.
is this handy and quick to use? It looks awkward.
It's actually better than you think. The rifle itself is pretty short, and it's super light, like ridiculously light, actually. And like I said, it's a little, once you get how it's supposed to work, again, you have to half cock it at least. Because if you don't cock the hammer for the percussion cap, the bolt stays locked in place, which is theorized to be just help if there's a failure to fire. So you're not just whipping the bolt open and then having an out of battery detonation. Because these are still it's using paper cartridges at this time.
Oh,
And so you're loading a paper
crazy.
cartridge into the breech, in which the bolt face actually has, it's kind of a little bowl, but it has tiny little serrations on the outside. So when you close the bowl, it's rotating, and as it does that, it actually slices into the paper cartridge to help with ignition with the percussion cap on it.
That's
That's
wild.
crazy.
Another difference between this and the actual adopted model is that the back of the bolt has locking lugs. The adopted chassepot is very much a traditional black powder rifle, where it's just using the bolt handle against the receiver as the locking surface. But with this gun, the bolt handle is behind the entire receiver, so they actually have two little small locking lugs that are in the back. And so that's what the little tab on top of the bolt is. It acts as kind of a depressor to be able to rotate those lugs and then pull the bolt out itself.
Wow, that's a slightly complicated thing.
Yeah, it's obviously it's that period of, we're trying to figure out what we want breech loaders to be. We don't really know yet. Are they going to be conversions of muskets? We have this idea of, because by this point the French have copies of the dry stuff from Germany and are doing secret tests of their own to see what they kind of want to do. Everyone has the idea that some sort of bolt action, is going to be potentially the future. Again, they haven't settled on the needle fire system yet. That isn't until Napoleon III declares that's what he wants. They're still using a percussion style system, so still an older style system, but kind of marrying it with new technology. France trying to cut measures by, we're going to reuse old muskets. It's going to be a conversion. It's a bigger caliber and like bore diameter than the adopted chassepot. So the adopted chassepot, people say it's 11 millimeter. It technically fires an 11.5 millimeter bullet. It's a squeeze bore design, down
And
to an
that's
11
bigger than
millimeter.
that?
Yes, this is actually a 13 millimeter. So it's
Ooh,
slightly slightly larger.
wow.
Um, which I had someone ask me if like a Shaspo bayonet fits on this. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It probably had its own, or used some sort of sword bayonet on it. But yeah, it's slightly beefier than the adopted Shaspo. It still has also it still uses rubber obturator like the actual Shaspo does, but it's a much smaller, and it's probably to help with just fouling of the system more than it is containing gas. But obviously, it does still have some gas containing properties to it.
Now, I don't know if I asked about the earlier ones, but do you shoot these?
I personally,
Or are you
so
too
all
scared?
the ones I've talked about, I haven't. This one, it's in really good condition, and I kind of want to shoot it just because it's one of those things like Michael said about his Scody. It'd be one of those things where no one has a video of the shooting. Like Ian has not covered this. This is not covered in any English source that I've been able to find. Ian's book doesn't. Ian's book mentions that there's earlier designs. He doesn't even mention the years. At least in the first edition. I don't know if he fleshes that out in later editions. But there's no pictures of these. So like if I
Yeah,
was to
this is
fire this and post it, it would be probably the first of its kind to be posted. I don't know how many were made. My guess is only a couple hundred at most. So it's potentially rarer than even the Chaffee Reese.
wow.
Do it.
Yeah, shoot it.
It's one of those things where it's like
Do
I feel like I kind of have to at least once, at least like kind of a weaker load. 'Cause I would imagine there's probably it has some like recoil lugs in it, so at least I don't think the stock would crack. I'm doing it a couple times. But yeah, the other ones I haven't shot yet. The musket I'm kind of tempted to. That one has a period stock repair though, so that's kind of iffy. And then I mentioned the Chaffee Reese also has a stock repair on that, and those breaking at the tang was a known issue with them. So that one might be just another one that just kind of sits on my rack, which I'm personally okay with. I know some people like to shoot all theirs. But
Right.
I personally don't mind, at least especially with rare stuff, for it
Yeah.
to
Old
sit there for
and
research
rare stuff.
purposes.
You could be careful. It's all right.
But yeah, marking wise, it's pretty scarce. From what I've seen, the 1865 variants have a lot more markings on those. Those usually have a date on them and then some serials. I've seen on mine on there's a lock face right behind the hammer. There is usually on like French muskets. There's a arsenal marking. On this, it doesn't have one. I don't know if that was removed or if this was never given one. It does have a small little F with a crown over it, which that one is usually indicating Saint Etienne as a manufacturer. But I don't know if that's just the lock plate or if that was made there.
The soldiers must have been pretty dumb back then because they kept trying to keep the hammer and with the trapdoor too, and they kept saying one of the reasons was the familiarity with the hammer and how it works. I mean, they
Yeah,
can figure out
they
the
believe that
bolt.
obviously the bolt will be a little bit more, maybe a little bit more complicated than most of the soldiers could to handle.
Yeah,
Because at
they
this
just
time, France is still they're not conscripting; it's still a professional army at this point. You still have a little bit of conscription, but it's not the universal conscription that happened after the Franco-Prussian War. But France also at this point is extremely illiterate and will be until World War II. So obviously, keeping some familiarity is
yeah.
much needed. And it's a fairly reliable system. Again, they have the serrations on the bolt to try and make sure that ignition always goes off. It's a fairly easy system. If you have an issue, you just pull out the cleaning rod and knock the round out. Um, so it's not super
Right.
complicated. And I haven't taken it apart as much as I should. I want to do a deep dive on the bolt, especially compare it to the 1866 model.
Oh,
Kind
oh,
of do like
that's right. The cleaning rod could go down and out.
yeah, because I mean, a lot of times they were clearing rods was the term
Right.
that comes into this period because it's clearing out rounds that failed to fire, so you just knock it out and then put another one in.
Oh, that's cool. Another thing I'm not gonna ever have. All right.
I never thought I would find one. I just randomly some guy I buy from every once in a while had one, and it's now become I guess the crown jewel of my collection.
Yeah, that's some crazy shit
You
to
also
find.
kind of brought this onto yourself by inviting us.
I know. I know. I know what you guys have. It's all right.
Again, like
Yeah,
like like Michael said though, it's like I sound like I have a bunch of cool stuff, which obviously I do, but then I also have a bunch of just absolutely boring random stuff.
yeah, can we get some more boring guys in here next time?
Right. We need some more VZ-24s or something.
Yeah, here's
I
my
would just like to
24th
thank
RTI Vetterly.
RTI special episode.
Yeah. That'd
Talk
be
about your
sad.
fastest rifle from Ethiopia.
Yeah, I'll be in the finals, I think. That's for sure. All right. Kelly, the last one. What do you have, bud?
All right, well, not much of a follow up to that. It is not nearly as rare or interesting, but I still think it's kind of neat. This one will be my Japanese Type 30. So these are the design itself is just kind of cool because it's I think Sam mentioned earlier, it's a conglomeration of kind of like Mannlicher and Mauser designs, and then the Japanese throw in their own weird twists. They were like first came out in 1897, and it was the first rifle that was chambered in. It's one of my favorite cartridges, 6.5 by 50 millimeter semi-rim Japanese. Love 6.5 Japanese. It's one of my favorites to shoot. And they were overall a pretty good design, but the bolt is super weird and has a bunch of like unnecessary parts, and it's a pain in the ass to take apart. And it's known for its safety design, which is known as the hook safety, because it kind of has like a little hook that you put your finger around that you can pull it back and then twist it, which is very unique. I think only like there's one or two other rifles out there that use that kind of thing to make a safety. It's super unique looking, and overall it's a pretty good rifle, especially for the time period when everyone is adopting weird designs, and then the Japanese go adopt a semi-Mauser, semi-Mannlicher, so they're really good at taking other people's ideas and making them slightly better. But the thing that makes it interesting to me is has a one more specific marking, so I guess I'm a sucker for specific markings. It has a little triangle on the receiver, and what that means is it's a Japanese stamp that means acceptable for reissue, and they put this on rifles that they had captured. So this was a rifle that was made by the Japanese that they at some point lost control of, and then they recaptured and reissued. And it does have a ground mum, so it was brought back after World War II. So it at some point either got lost during this one was based on the serials made somewhere around like 1900 or so. They made these up until 1905. They used them extensively during the Russo-Japanese War, and then during various mean and not so fun times in China and things like that, in Pacific Islands. So at some point left the Japanese control either to like Russia or China, or it could have been one of the ones they sold off to like Finland or England or Russia. It doesn't have any Finnish or English marks. I think there are some specific marks that they put on them, so maybe I need to inspect it closer once again. But then at some point they re-encountered this rifle and recaptured it, which I think is super cool. That's made its way back there. So
Yeah, that is.
that probably makes it likely that it's Chinese.
Well, I want one just for the hook safety.
Yeah, they're super weird.
That's
and cool.
cool.
And let's see some stats. They made 554,000 of these and like 45,000 carbines. 100,000 were sold off to the European countries in the World War I era, to the Brits and Finnish and Russia.
I see a lot of training versions.
Yeah, they made like 20,000 training ones or something like that. 10,000. Don't remember exactly, but I guess tips for these is the cleaning rod is half the value. So a lot of these don't have their original cleaning rod, and they're different from a Type 38 cleaning rod because they have a pinned on brass tip. And mine, it has a brass tip, but I don't see the pin anywhere, and it's either worn off to where I can't see the pin, or it's a very well made reproduction that has a lot of like artificial wear on it.
And do they have mums?
So they did have mums, and they had like the Japanese markings that designated like rifle or like model or like rifle Type 30 or something like that. Okay. And they have like the two vent holes on top, so if it looks different than your standard Type 38, take a closer look. And mine also has a couple of I guess they're called kanji, the Japanese alphabet marks that mark it as like obsolete rifle or obsolete gun or something like that. So it's probably used as like a trainer in World War II, and that's probably where it got picked up by a GI and brought back.
So it had like 5 different uses in its life.
So yeah, it's been at least twice captured, maybe 3 times.
Wow. All right, it's getting fucking late. So, all right, so there's still more shit from our collections to cover. We'll do in another time. I learned a lot more than I thought I was going to learn from you guys. You guys really brought some really killer shit. So I really appreciate you guys digging shit out of your collections and taking them out of your safes and off your walls and all that.
Yeah, all my stuff with hundreds of thousands.
Trying to
produced, and
impress.
hundreds in here.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll definitely get you some pictures for it.
That's only where I've seen most of these guns and photos. The Chafe Reese I've only read about in books, you know? So that's crazy. So
That's what we're here for, so you can bask in our glory.
yep, I'll live through you guys because I'm not going to get them, so I'll live through you. Like I always had on my list a Romanian 93, and I just every time I wrote it down, I'd laugh like I'm not getting this. Why am I writing it down?
See, none of these were ones that I wanted to get. I just happened to.
Ha, yeah, that happens too. But I hope we pique some new interest with some of the listeners, and there'll soon be some more angry wives and girlfriends out there as their spouses are spending money on a whole bunch of things. So I hope I represented the Mausers as well too. I brought a couple of those.
Yeah, I brought you one. Brought you one too.
Yes, thank you, appreciate it. And the biggest of all, the tank Mauser.
Daddy Mauser.
The size of a small child, weight-wise.
Maybe the next show we'll do something with the upcoming KC trip. What we're gonna buy or something. We'll see how that goes. But until then, again, thanks everyone for coming and spending so much time here and sharing all your info and doing all your homework. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. We'll have to do a. What are we gonna do next? The accessories episode or other shit episode?
Yes, we definitely have to get into our. We had a section here on some accessories, bayonets, and my favorite was going to be the ugliest shit we had and most bubbid shit. So we'll see that another time. I'm curious if you guys have any. I doubt it now. So, all right, that's it. Thanks for listening. Check out the Patreon, the YouTube. I'll put a video out soon. Later.
See you.
See ya.
Right.